Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Fire and Emergencies Management Committee meeting. If you want to submit, for those people that are on Zoom, if you want to submit any statements, you can do it at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, if you want to submit any written testimony, you can do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Everyone, please silence any electronic devices. Madam Chair, we're ready to begin.
Thank you to my colleagues and the administration and the public for joining us this morning for this important hearing. The FDNY is composed of skilled men and women who regularly risk their lives to protect the residents, workers, and visitors of New York City. I want to thank all who serve our city as part of the New York City Fire Department. You truly are our bravest. As a committee, we're focused on working with the fire department to enhance public safety and the safety of its members. However, even the greatest of fire departments can improve, and we are committed to working with the administration to make those improvements. Whether it is critically examining the department's budget to eliminate wasteful spending, advocating for equipment and facility upgrades for our firefighters and EMS workers, or considering amendments to the fire code aimed to provide fire safety, this committee will never stop working on impactful issues that help our government and city function better for all New Yorkers. And in doing so, this committee is ready to have the necessary conversations regarding those issues that will impact change. That brings us to the topic of today's hearing. Evaluating diversity and inclusion in the fire department, an area where I hope that as a committee, we can help move the ball forward in addressing a longstanding issue of expanding diversity and inclusion that the department has been working on. The council has held numerous hearings over the years on the low statistics of female and minority firefighters representing New York's bravest. In 2013 and 14, the council held hearings on ways to increase the number of the city's female firefighters. Although there has been a recruitment effort put forth, nearly 10 years later, the number of females represented in the department is still at approximately 1%. In 2018, this committee held a hearing on overall diversity to show that minorities were underrepresented in the department. Today's hearing will seek to learn what progress has been made by the department regarding the increase in minority and female representation. Over the years, FDNY and the city have faced lawsuits regarding the department's hiring practices with respect to female and racial and ethnic minority candidates. Since 2014, the department's exam and hiring process has been subject to a federal monitor due to a settlement following one of the lawsuits filed by the United States Department of Justice and the Vulcan Society, an organization of black firefighters in the FDNY. Fortunately, in recent testing cycles, we have seen the department demonstrate a commitment to improving the recruitment of underrepresented candidates, as evidenced by the increased budgetary expenditures and ongoing work to improve diversity and inclusion in the department. Although the FDNY has enhanced its efforts in recent years to recruit women and minorities, resulting in more historically underrepresented groups taking the firefighter exam, the number of women and minority firefighters remains extremely low relative to both city agencies and other firefighting agencies across the country. Beyond recruitment, the committee wants to have a better understanding of the obstacles faced by women and minorities seeking to become New York City firefighters and what ongoing steps that the department has taken or plans to take in order to address these obstacles. In addition to discussing these important topics, the committee will be hearing related legislation that aims to address some of the issues. Intro 516, sponsored by Speaker Adams, would require the fire department, in consultation with the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, to develop and implement a plan for ensuring that racial, ethnic, and gender demographics in the department's firefighters reflect that of the city's population as a whole. Intro 519, sponsored by myself, would require the fire department to survey each firehouse to determine the permanent facility upgrades necessary to ensure a safe working environment for a mixed gender workforce. Women deserve facilities that provide the safety and privacy necessary to do their jobs in every firehouse. No later than 6 months after completion of the survey, the department would be required to issue a public report on the findings of the survey detailing the permanent facility upgrades necessary for each firehouse selected, as well as a plan to implement such upgrades. The fire department would be required to complete permanent facility upgrades identified in the report no later than 5 years after the submission of the report. We have Intro 552, sponsored by Councilmember Kevin Riley, which would require the fire department to publicly report on the demographics of his firehouses and report information on members residing within the geographic area that their firehouse covers. Intro 552, also sponsored by Councilmember Riley, would require the fire department, in consultation with DCAS and the city's Commission on Human Rights, to develop and implement a plan for providing ongoing training and education to all members of staff regarding harassment and diversity and inclusion. And finally, Introduction 560, sponsored by Councilmember Natasha Williams, would require the fire department to submit a public report on complaints filed with the department's Equal Employment Opportunity Office regarding potential violations of the city's Equal Employment Opportunity Policy. I look forward to a productive discussion today, and I am eager to hear the department and administration's vision for continuing important work in making members of New York's bravest attractive to all New Yorkers. I now turn the floor to our speaker, Adrienne Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Adrienne Adams, Speaker of the New York City Council, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today, and thank you, Councilmember Joanne Ariola, for convening this very important hearing today. No one can doubt the incredible work that New York City firefighters undertake every single day. In addition to fires, our heroic FDNY firefighters respond to vehicle collisions, high-rise life-saving mediation, downed wires, floods, and much, much more. The FDNY is the largest fire department in the country and responds to over 1 million emergencies each year. They are, without question, our bravest. As a native New Yorker, I am incredibly proud of the work of the FDNY, and their ethos represents the very best of our city. And I can personally attest to that ethos because my own daughter is an FDNY paramedic. Unfortunately, though, the makeup of the FDNY is not representative of our great city. Like other fire departments across the country, FDNY firefighters tend to be disproportionately comprised of white men, despite white men making up less than a quarter of New York City's population. 76% of our firefighters are white, only 8% are black, 13% are Hispanic, and just 2% are Asian. Worse is that only 139 of the 11,000 firefighters at FDNY are women, making up a meager 1% of the ranks. The lack of diversity within the department isn't new, but it is persistent, and this council remains committed to efforts that ensure progress towards a diverse FDNY. That's why we've convened an oversight hearing and are seeking to enact new laws. Despite previous efforts to boost diversity, There is much more work that has to be undertaken, and these bills fortify that effort. It is crucial that the city's firefighters and all of our workforce are reflective of New York City's population. This is why we're announcing a package of bills to confront this persisting inequity. My bill, Introduction 516, would require the FDNY to develop and implement a plan to ensure that firefighters are reflective of the racial, ethnic, and gender demographics of our city. Under this bill, the FDNY would also be required to annually report on its efforts to recruit and retain female firefighters and firefighters of diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, and project increases in their percentages of the force. In addition to my bill, we will also hear legislation by my colleagues that aim to address this critical issue in different ways. These bills help foster improvement by ensuring gender-appropriate workplaces for all firefighters, requiring ongoing diversity, equity, inclusion training, and increasing transparency on demographics and equal employment opportunity complaints within the department. We know that the culture within our agencies must foster an inclusive environment in order for diversity to be achieved, yet far too often we've heard troubling stories about incidents that are the opposite and downright hostile to diversity in FDNY. That is unacceptable and something our city must clearly address and eradicate, or else the ability to diversify, which should be our united goal, will be undermined. We cannot ignore these injustices. And as leaders in this historically diverse and women-majority council, we are prioritizing solutions to these persistent problems of inequity. This is an issue of not only equity and justice, but one of fundamental safety for all New Yorkers. The credibility of our agencies is connected to their being reflective of those they serve, and the FDNY is a pivotal agency to public safety. I look forward to hearing feedback on this issue, testimony from the administration, advocates, and the public. Again, I extend my sincere thanks to all who have made today's hearing possible and have taken the time to join us so that we can work together to finally making significant strides to diversify New York City's firefighters. I now turn it back over to Chair Ariola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd also like to note that Council members Hudson, Riley, and the former chair of Fire and Emergency Management and now Minority Leader Joseph Borelli have joined us. There will be opening statements regarding their bills by Councilmember Riley and Williams. The chair recognizes Councilmember Kevin Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Today we build trust and strengthen relationships when the entire community can see themselves and those who serve and protect them on a daily basis. Ensuring there's true representation, diversity, and inclusion in our city fire department is vital to staying true to our commitment to advocate for our underserved New Yorkers. However, true equity relies on more than just the representation and the diversification of members and staff. Equity identifies the flaws in our system and creates a plan for the protection of all FANY workers. In this historical, diverse, and women-majority city council, it is extremely important that we push this legislative package that demands ethnic and gender diversity. As part of this initiative, I introduced 2 pieces of legislation today in partnership with Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson that brings transparency and accountability to encourage inclusivity in the Department of Workplace Culture. Intro 552 calls for the annual report of the demographic of the fire department on the members at the firehouse. Intro 553 will require ongoing training on diversity and inclusion and harassment for all fire department members and staff. I encourage and support the intros that are introducing today and the entire fire diversity and inclusion bill package. I am grateful for the partnership of my colleagues who are sponsoring these bills and make a mark on our city's history for real advocacy and equity. Thank you, Chair Ariola.
Thank you, Councilmember. The chair now recognizes Councilmember Natasha Williams.
Thank you. As chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee, I am committed to ensuring that all New Yorkers have access to a safe and equitable workplace and that they are not discriminated against. Intro number 560, which you've heard from Chair Ariola, would require the New York City Fire Department to report on complaints filed with the department's Equal Employment Opportunity Office regarding potential violations of the city's Equal Employment Opportunity Policy. This report must be submitted no later than 30 days after the end of each fiscal year and would include information about the number of complaints that resulted in corrective action taken by the fire department. It will be given to the mayor, the speaker of the council, and posted on the department's website. This piece of legislation will provide much-needed transparency around employee complaints and will allow for more accountability and oversight by stakeholders, ensuring that these complaints are resolved promptly and equitably. A diverse workforce allows for more innovation than a homogeneous one, because diverse teams tend to represent a wide variety of perspectives. They're often better equipped to solve problems than teams composed mostly of people with similar backgrounds or experiences. Equal employment opportunities are crucial to the success of any agency and organization. Without them, we would be unable to attract and retain the best talent. In addition, by providing equal employment opportunities, you can ensure that all aspects of an organization are operating at their peak potential, as well as increase productivity and morale. I am proud to have introduced this bill, and I want to thank my colleagues who have co-sponsored the bill. I encourage other colleagues to sign on. I also want to thank Chair Ariola for conducting this crucial hearing and Speaker Adrienne Adams for her continued leadership. Thank you.
I'll now hand the mic back to our counsel, Josh Kingsley.
Thank you, Chair. I will now be swearing in members of the administration to testify. From the FDNY, we have Fire Commissioner Laura Kavanaugh. We have Assistant Commissioner Dan Nguyen, Chief Malcolm Moore, Assistant Commissioner Nafisha Noonan, Chief John Hodgins, and Deputy Commissioner Lizette Kristoff. I'm going to swear you all in. If you could raise your right hand and repeat after me, you could just affirm the following. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin. Go ahead.
I do.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair and Speaker, and all the council members present. I could not agree more with the sentiments shared here this morning. In the interest of getting right to the heart of the matter that I think we all care so much about, and in particular discussing these important bills that we support, I'm actually not going to read my lengthy testimony that you all have in front of you and I've already submitted. I'd actually like to start a conversation about the bills, if that's okay with everybody present. I'd just like to say something briefly, which is that I joined the FDNY in the wake of the Vulcan lawsuit a few years ago. That commitment to diversifying the department has been at the heart of my work every step of the way and in every role I've held at the New York City Fire Department. I know very much personally the cost of speaking out about racist and sexist acts in the FDNY, as I have done so myself and experienced that. That doesn't mean I know what our firefighters and EMTs feel like working in a firehouse, but it does mean that I believe them and that this work is extraordinarily personal to me. I know that working together, we can get this done. I'd also like to say the New York City Fire Department is the most extraordinary organization that I have ever encountered in my 20 years of work in government and politics. There is nothing that I have ever seen that we cannot do if we do together that is fundamentally at the heart of the New York City Fire Department, that with all the difficult work they do because they do it as a team. I know that the vast majority of our members are there for their brothers and sisters and have no tolerance for this sort of behavior. The few that do commit racist or sexist acts or remarks will not be tolerated in my administration. And I truly believe we are at a unique point to have a supportive council, to have supportive advocates who sit behind me, to have a team that is representative, that works with me, and to have a mayor who's served in uniform and has fought against discrimination in a uniformed agency. I believe we are at a unique point in which we have the tools to truly push forward and get a lot done, and I cannot wait to do it together, working with everyone in this room, from our advocates to the members, to the union, to the mayor's office. I am very much looking forward to progressing together, and so I'd love to dive right into your questions and the bills at hand.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner Kavanaugh. The fire department and the city have been sued multiple times relating to their hiring practices for women and minorities. When did the fire department first allow women to serve as firefighters?
Women were allowed into the department in 1981 as the result of a lawsuit.
And when did the fire department become racially integrated? Was this as a result of the court action, or was it something that was voluntarily taken on by the department?
So there are black firefighters who have made their way into the department over a century ago. They, I would say, have fought their way into the department. The most well-known is Wesley Williams, who was the first person to rise through the ranks and is also the founder of the Vulcan Society. But in terms of, I think, what you're getting at and whether or not those numbers actually grew, those were as a result of lawsuits beginning in the 70s, a series of lawsuits that actually grew the number of black firefighters substantially, as opposed to individual firefighters who had fought their way in earlier decades.
Commissioner, you mentioned the Vulcan Society. So the fire department hiring process is currently under federal receivership or monitor because of one of the findings from one of the lawsuits that was put in by the Vulcan Society. So, you know, what specific components of the FDNY, as a result of that ruling, what specific components of the fire department exam and hiring process has been changed?
So it's quite substantial. The monitorship covers everything from the initial entry-level exam through to their time at the fire academy and their placements, actually, when they leave the fire academy. Every single stage in that process, which we can get into, it's quite extensive, from the written to the physical to the hiring process in terms of various evaluations, their medical examination, a background check. Every single step of that process is subject to the monitorship, and every single step in that process has been looked at and changed over the course of the 8 or so years that we have been under monitorship. And we continue with that process. We meet with the monitor quite often, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and we review each of the stages of those processes and actually look for continued improvements at every step.
Okay, and is there a contemplated end date for the court monitorship, and who must agree to the decision when that would be terminated?
There is not at this time, and that is ultimately Judge Garifas's decision.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
There is not at this time, and that is ultimately the decision of Judge Garifas, who is the judge overseeing the case, who appointed the court monitor.
When talking about diversity, and we do this at all our hearings, and diversity is a major topic for this council and for the administration. So I know that the FDNY had made strides to create 2 positions as part of, and they were asked, as part of the 2014 federal settlement to create 2 positions, one a chief diversity and another an inclusion officer, as well as a diversity advocate. How far along are we on those hirings?
So we have had a CDIO and a diversity advocate in place since the lawsuit was settled. We've had a few people in each of those positions. The diversity advocate position actually formally turns over every 2 years, and then the CDIO is an executive position, and so it's replaced as people leave or as administrations turn over. Currently, we have a diversity advocate serving in that role. His name is Lieutenant Logan. He works primarily at the fire academy with our probationary firefighters, which is the primary role of the advocate, although there are some other things the advocate does speak to. And we have an interim CDIO right now who has been serving since the last CDIO left the end of the last administration, and we have actually hired a permanent CDIO who is scheduled to start on November 1st, but has been in conversations, active conversations with me around the plans for what he is going to enact when he gets here.
Okay, and what would the job description for each of those positions be?
So the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer is a deputy commissioner level title, which means they sit on the executive leadership staff. They report directly to me as fire commissioner, and they have a much broader role. There are some technical compliance roles that fall under their position, but they also have a broad role among the entire executive staff, uniform and civilian, for evaluating and weighing in and consulting on where changes should be made anywhere in the department. That's sort of a C-suite role, as you might call it. The diversity advocate is a uniform position, so right now we have a lieutenant, a fire lieutenant, who I believe is here in this room, Lieutenant Logan, and their role is primarily around working with the probationary firefighters and giving the commissioner and the other senior staff feedback on how things are going at the academy, what things can change, the specific concerns of probationary firefighters, and helping to advocate for them in the process as they move through the academy and as they are placed into their firehouses upon graduation.
And I think it's important for the record to reflect that there has been a chief diversity officer hired.
Yes.
They were unable to testify here today with us today because their start date has not begun, so I appreciate you really describing each of what the job descriptions are.
Yeah, I would really like each of you to meet him as a really incredible candidate and has both a extensive uniform experience as well as extensive academic experience in firehouse culture specifically. Those are two things we have never had in that role before, and I think they are incredibly important because I think, as many of you have referenced and we'll talk about more, the unique culture in the firehouse is often something that really only someone in uniform can understand and work to change, and I think he's going to be a really incredible resource for the executive team. So he will be here prior to the 1st, even though that's his official start date. I have been working with him, and I'd love to have him sit down with each of you to discuss his vision.
We look forward to having him come before us. What steps has the fire department undertaken to improve its recruitment of the underrepresented groups?
So I will say something briefly and then pass it over to our Assistant Commissioner for Recruitment and Retention, Nafisa Noonan. But the fire department has undertaken the single most extensive recruitment campaign of any fire department around the country. We have consulted with our counterparts. In part, we were able to undertake such an extensive recruitment effort and analysis because the court monitorship and the mayor's office gave us the resources to do that. And, you know, two of the tenets that we really came at that with was, one, that we needed to get data away from that. So the numbers were not enough unless we understood what was working and what wasn't, so that we could prepare for all future recruitment campaigns. And also ensuring that we reached every neighborhood of the city and that we were really talking to New Yorkers about the benefits of this job that so many people on the job know about. And so those efforts were really extensive. Well over $10 million was spent on that effort. We had huge historic percentage increases in the numbers of diverse candidates applying. We had the first list that was majority non-white men in the history of the department. And I will let Commissioner Noonan speak a little bit more about what that took to get there.
And you have actual budgetary commitments towards this recruitment?
Yes,
correct?
we recruit every 4 years, and so our budget is generally set up to put the majority of the resources in the recruitment year, which is a function of civil service, the every 4-year schedule.
So we have seen quite historic numbers for filers. Thank you, filers. But we have noticed some attrition as candidates move further through the process. We've seen some drop off as they pass the exam, also drop off as they become reachable. Meaning, you know, we had over 42,000 candidates actually take the exam, but not all of them are going to be within reachable averages. So my office spends a lot of time focusing on attrition mitigation throughout the process. So once a candidate passes the exam, they have to go through the candidate physical ability test, which we know is the highest point of attrition for all candidates, right? Over 50% for many. So we offer a training program that goes between 8 and more than 12 at this point. I want to say this time around, we're probably holding the longest training program we've held ever because we've had quite a bit of a delay due to the pandemic. We haven't had a CPAT exam, which is the physical exam for firefighters, for about 3 years now. So, you know, that is out of the FDNY's control. That is based on what happened with the pandemic and DCAS, and now it actually is in the hands of the judge and giving us the approval to move forward with the CPAT exam. So offering training to make sure that the candidates are prepared for the CPAT exam when it comes up, looking at analysis that we've spent quite a bit of time going through over the last 2 years to understand what it takes for a candidate to pass a CPAT exam. For men, 5 training sessions at the academy, for women 7, and being very specific and communicating those goals to the candidates. Opening up a candidate portal is something that we've done recently as well, which is a portal to give more transparency to candidates. The ability for a layperson to come into civil service and go through the process to become a firefighter can be difficult, can be challenging. There's a lot of steps. And so making sure that they have the resources at their fingertips and that they know how important it is to utilize those programs. Going back to the fitness element of it though, the department has, in addition to its CPAT training, we've started a stair mill training program, which is one of the evolutions as a part of the CPAT exam. And what we know is that most candidates that fail at that portion. And that is something that we've learned recently. So we've developed a stair mill training program, and we're offering it now to candidates that are a part of the group that is going to be taking their CPAT exam coming up. So communicating to that group how important it is to participate in CPAT training, participate in stair mill training, and then taking it a step further and partnering with the New York City Parks Department, some of the rec centers that have stair mills available. We are sending them weighted vests so that candidates can go to a location that's maybe even closer to their homes and practice on their own in addition to practicing with us. So that's one of the portions, and we know it's the highest point of attrition. So we do put a lot of focused efforts into making sure candidates understand how important it is to be physically fit. It's also important for us to give them measurable goals and to understand how long they have to maintain that peak physical fitness. So that's a part that we're working on with the court monitor because we don't necessarily have full control over when the exam will be administered this time around. But the attrition, over the last the delay over the last several years has been a challenge for us, and we're hoping to be able to build from additional focus groups, additional surveys to candidates that have attrited, to women that have attrited, to be able to speak better to how we can, service them better within our programs.
So thank you. The FDNY has agreed to provide opportunities to high school and college students to help them pursue careers as firefighters. Can you just describe how the department has undertaken this effort with CUNY and the DOE, and has there been a lot of engagement?
There's been a lot of engagement. Of course, over the last couple of years, it's been a bit challenging because most of it was virtually. So we're back in a space where we're comfortable, where we're able to go into the schools and into the colleges, into the high schools. But once those interests give us their information, we have the ability to communicate with them, right? We're inviting them to, let's say, mobile academies that we have in locations that are close by them so that they can do some physical fitness things with firefighters or recruiters that are on staff. They can ask key questions. Once an opportunity comes up for the application period, we bring them in to help them with the application. We also find it very important, and data has shown that candidates that have taken our tutorial program, which is a program that we put in place to make sure that candidates are informed about what the exam is going to look like, and they know what's important to complete. They're getting refreshed about their reading skills, their math skills that may be required, and that's something that we know we need to push even harder for the next campaign, because we already see the results. Those candidates, those diverse candidates that participated in those programs have a much higher likeliness of being amongst the reachables. So again, using the data that we found to tweak programs, to put more funding into those resources is pretty much what we're doing. It's really a data-driven effort. And not so much based on what we assume. We're really looking at the data and the responses from the candidates.
I'd also like to, add one thing, if you don't mind, that we've talked a lot about fire safety education in these hearings before and with a lot of members I'm sitting in front of. And one thing I'd really like to emphasize, something we learned early and often in our focus groups many years ago with recruiting, is that the knowledge about the job and seeing someone who looks like you in the job is one of the more powerful ways to change the minds of young people in the city about whether or not this is a career for them. And so we see not just events that are specifically for recruiting, but especially events where we are sending diverse firefighters into city classrooms to be actually just as powerful long-term recruiting tools as they change the nature of what young people think of the job and whether or not it's available to them. And so I just continue to emphasize, I know all of you welcome our fire safety educators in, but to emphasize that that is also a recruiting effort in and of itself, by letting young people see that the nature of the job and the face of the job is changing.
Thank you. Actually, your comprehensive answer answered my next question. So I am going to now yield the mic to the speaker, Adrienne Adams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Acting Commissioner, always great to see you. Welcome.
You as
Welcome
well.
to your team as well. Let's stay on the subject of recruitment for a second. What neighborhoods are targeted for your recruiting methods?
So we target the most diverse neighborhoods, especially we look at, as I think many of you know, you have to be between 21 and 29 to come on the job. So we actually break down the census data with that age as well, and then look at the most diverse census tracts that have age-eligible candidates. I don't know if Nafisa would like to add anything.
That's true, and we have to look at what's changing as well, right? These neighborhoods do change, and so
We just need for you to put your mic.
these neighborhoods
Perfect.
do change, so we try to keep up with that trend as well. Before we're attending events, we're looking at what the population is at that event. We also rely on our community members, the partners, to let us know if we're missing anything, right? But once we're in a campaign, we get so granular. We work with our management analysis and planning team, and they actually develop heat maps for us. And they layer on top of those heat maps the EOI interest that we've actually accumulated thus far. And if there are pockets of areas where, you know, we're seeing more Black, more Hispanic, more Asian candidates, and we're not saturating them, it does help us to pivot and move, better represent that area so that we can collect the interests of those people that may be interested in becoming firefighters. So I would say both, right? Working with our partners, working with our internal teams, looking at the data as well to make sure that we're collecting the interest that we want to recruit to continue to diversify.
Thank you. Do you actively recruit outside of the 5 boroughs, and if so, how often does that recruitment take place?
We primarily recruit inside the 5 boroughs. I would say for EMS members, we may do more recruitment outside. For instance, there was a program that happened over the weekend for HBCU at the MetLife Stadium, and we were absolutely there because we know it's important to be at a location where young Black and men and women across the city and maybe across the state know that there's a place for them at the FDNY. So I'm eager to see how well that event went when I get back into the office, but that would be an opportunity where we feel like we have to leave, the 5 boroughs because there's an opportunity for us to meet college-bound students or students that are within college or alumni that can help us to spread the message that the FDNY is interested in them.
We also recruit veterans, and occasionally those events are outside the city as well. We often go to where they are and talk to them about their post-military life and have the fire department as an option. But otherwise, the majority of what we do is in the 5 boroughs.
Great, thank you. Why is citizenship a prerequisite to joining FDNY?
I think that's a question for the law department. I do not know the answer to that.
Okay, all right. Generally speaking then, how long does it take to get from applying to take the civil service exam to being hired as a firefighter?
So it's very extensive. It depends how close to a recruiting cycle you are. So for instance, if the test was being given this year and you took it and you scored very high and you're towards the top of the list, you might be looking at a couple of years. If say the test had just been given and you now have to wait another 4 years for it to be given again, and you scored high but slightly lower down in that list, you might be waiting up to 6 years. And so it is a really extensive process. And one reason Commissioner Noonan was talking about all the programs we do in between, many of those programs are to try to hold interest in those intervening years because it can be such a lengthy process between when you first talk to us about the job and when the test is actually given, and then you actually come off that list.
Right, and thank you. I think Commissioner Noonan touched on it, but the prep courses that are available, talk to us a little bit about the preparation courses available to firefighter applicants for the various steps of the process.
So once a candidate is called for the CPAT, they have access to a mentor, right? So we have our mentorship program, which we feel is key for those candidates that are not traditional members, that don't have family on the job. They have the opportunity to be partnered with a veteran firefighter that can help them understand the culture, and also they're trained in understanding the basics of the hiring process. So they get a mentor, They are invited into the CPAT training program, which is a program that's going to prepare them and help them to excel and pass the CPAT exam. We have the STAIR program, which is something newer that we've introduced to pinpoint the area of the CPAT that many candidates tend to attrit. So you have the CPAT training program. Once you pass the physical fitness program, once you pass the CPAT exam, we have the physical awareness program, which is a program to help you maintain that fitness level so that you're not falling off, you're not gaining weight, and you're preparing to go into the fire academy. So that program goes, and for candidates that are not going into that next cycle, they continue to go into the fitness awareness program, possibly for 2 or 3 cycles before their list number is reached and they're eligible to go into the next class. Again, to go back, once candidates are called for CPAT, they're also given access to the candidate portal. That candidate portal also gives them access to a tracking process so they can see where they are. Have you completed CPAT? Okay, you have completed CPAT. Are you within the background hiring? Have you completed your intake? Have you completed your medical? Have you completed your run? To keep candidates focused and encouraged for the next step or the steps that they've completed. There's a section for frequently asked questions. There are video resources on that application to help them to learn more about the process, to take away that myth of, I'm not sure what it is, but it's still overwhelming. It's a lot of information for people to absorb. There's also information on there about the probie school manuals, but we encourage them to read so that they're more prepared to go into probie school, because it's not just physical, it's academic as well. And we are encouraging them along the way to take those small steps, to read a little bit, to at least read the manual at least one time so that you're more prepared when you go into the academy. And it's a drum that we have to repeat, because candidates, they're motivated for points and then they're not. And we know it's so essential to mitigating this attrition that these candidates stay with us and stay motivated. Aside from the fitness awareness program, we have the resources of our coordinators. We have an African American coordinator a team of women coordinators. We have Hispanic coordinators, Asian and veteran coordinators. And in addition to the resources that all candidates have, these candidates are getting outreach from our coordinator team, right? So we have women reaching out to these women candidates that are on the list and pushing them and helping them to understand what resources are available and letting them know that they can reach out to the affinity organizations. And if there's a program available within the affinity organizations, we will communicate, we will text, we will email, we will call them and make sure that they know what resources are available to them. So we know we can't do it alone, so we definitely rely on whatever other resources are available, and many times that is the resources from the affinity organizations.
Thank you. I don't want to assume, but are there costs associated with prepping? And if so, how much?
I would say a majority of the costs are overtime costs. And that's something that we look at and we build in. The department has been very supportive in terms of making sure that, even though there may be certain restrictions, they're looking at the needs of recruitment and the timing of certain portions of the campaign and making sure that we still are able to hire those firefighters that are really dedicated to the mission and want to recruit and want to assist us on the phones and want to assist us within all the various programming. So, like I said, there is the majority of the cost is there, but we haven't felt the impact, or we haven't felt the lack of support from the administration. We've been able to still continue to do what we need to do.
What about the expense to the candidates?
There are some expenses. Once they get further into the process, so the exam itself was $25, I believe, and if you weren't working, we were able to assist candidates in waiving that fee. Once they start to go through the process, there is a fee for processing, like fingerprinting and things like that. But we try to communicate those fees to the candidates in advance. So if they are paying attention, and that information is also on the candidate portal, so that they know what to expect as they're getting closer to the next stage in the process.
Okay. In addition to that, the academy takes about 18 weeks to complete. Are the candidates compensated for the time?
Yes. Yes, when they're sworn in maybe a week before, and they're paid throughout the duration at the academy.
Is there financial support available to any candidate who may need it?
I think there is.
There are. We do have some foundation funds that are available, not just to probationary members, to actually any member who is experiencing particular difficulties.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to talk or ask a couple of questions about collecting data, and then I'm going to go into one final line of questioning for you. In 2015, the City Council enacted Local Law 49 that required the FDNY to publish data on the demographics of applicants for the firefighter civil service exam. That data provides information on how many applicants applied and how many passed each step of the process. You talked a little bit about this in your opening, but after analyzing the data, what conclusions have you come to in regards to where there might be issues with non-white or female applicants actually dropping from the process?
So I'll speak broadly, and Nafisa can talk about some of our programs, but what we've experienced over the years, and this has been supported by some focus groups that we did ahead of this recruitment campaign, is that the vast majority of places that we lose diverse candidates are in the early stages, and it's voluntary attrition. Why we believe that is as we've discussed, it takes a very long time to become a firefighter, and it often means having an alternative plan for those years that you're waiting. And what we actually found, we did focus groups not only of diverse age-eligible members within New York City, but we also did focus groups of our current firefighters, our traditional, white male firefighters. And what we found is that the vast majority of them had been thinking about this job from an extraordinarily young age, which meant that they had planned their career around that wait. And so we actually found that with our recruitment efforts, the opposite of what you would typically think with recruitment was true, in that most people believe that the person most recently recruited, if I recruited you yesterday and the test is tomorrow, you'd be the most likely to persist. In fact, it's quite the opposite, which is if I've been talking to you for 5 years, you're more likely to persist through that process. And we think that's in large part because previously it has been somewhat of an opaque process, and it is just a very long one. It's a hard one for any young person to wait those years for this job unless they know the value of what's on the other end and they know how to do something in between to support them and their family, whether that's college or another career. And so what we've found, is there's significant, the longer we do this, the more benefits we reap, because we are helping to instill that same early love of the job and proactive planning for all candidates that our current traditional candidates already have.
Yeah, I would just say some of the challenges, they go back to just making sure that the message is resonating with the candidates, right? If we are telling you what's required of you in order to pass the physical, which, like I said before, is the area where we see the most attrition in the early stages, how do we, trying to make sure that that message is landing with these candidates. We've also heard feedback from various focus groups and surveys that candidates wanted to hear more from us about how long it would take for us to reach them. So we've included communication within that to make sure that we're telling candidates based on once they're called for their CPAT, how long we anticipate they will take. Is it gonna be 6 months? Is it gonna be, the next fall? That we think that they'll start being called in for intake and processing. And those are benchmarks that candidates need so that they can ramp up their fitness levels, right? Because they know that once they start going into their background process and they pass their medical, the chance of them getting into that next class is really high, and they want to make sure that they're passing the entrance run and that they're prepared to go into the academy. The more physically fit they are, the more they can focus on the academic portion of the academy. So I would say just the challenges that we find is just looking at the data and finding creative ways to communicate that and make sure that that message is resonating with our women, with our Black and Hispanic candidates, our Asian candidates. So even though we may see at our CPAT training, the percentage and the turnout would be more Black and Hispanic than white candidates, those white candidates may have other resources that they're using, to get them to achieve the goals that they want. So we still know it's not enough, right? It may be a higher percentage of Black and Hispanic candidates attending our sessions, but it's not all of them, right? It's still the majority of them are not coming out. So we're constantly trying to find ways to tweak our messaging. We work with the mayor's behavioral science team pretty often. We met with them prior to the last campaign, and we've consistently met with them throughout the administration of this exam. And we've made some tweaks, right? We've implemented some new initiatives to get to the hearts and minds of some of the candidates. We've added a planning card that candidates can put on their refrigerator so that they can check off how many sessions they've attended, just trying to, whether it's a hard copy in your hand, an email, a text, but even still, we're still finding challenges in getting those messages to land, and it's things that we just have to continue to work on.
Okay, let's stick there for a minute. And speaking about resources, talk to us about legacy credits, what that means, what your typical percentage has been over the years when it comes to legacy credits in the department.
I don't know what the percentages are, but our highest adjusted final average for this exam was 114. So above residency points, the legacy credits is what would come into play. It's the legacy and also the military and veteran credits that candidates achieve. I am not able to tell you exactly how many of those candidates earned legacy points at this point, but that's something that we can get for you.
I do want to clarify, sometimes there's some confusion about this, that legacy credits are given if a parent or sibling died in the line of duty. It's not a legacy just because your parent worked at the department. Sometimes there's some confusion about that. And so there are, thankfully, not a very large number of folks applying for legacy credits, but there are a number at the top of each list when we do any recruitment campaign.
Okay. And finally, I just want to touch on a subject that we have in this package of bills pertaining to Intro 560 today. There have been public reports, and my office has also heard about troubling incidents of discrimination and harassment against firefighters of color and women, including in my own home community of Southeast Queens. I actually have someone who's as close as a family member that has actually been in the department for about 4 years or so and is now aspiring to reach higher ranks right now. How does the FDNY handle complaints individually, and what is done to assess and respond to patterns and practices that are problematic in fostering diversity?
So I mentioned at the top, this is very personal and I take it very seriously. I've undertaken, since I came into this position, a significant look at our EEO cases as well as some of our other disciplinary cases that have overlap with EEO. So for instance, a negative climate in a firehouse, even if it's not directly EEO related, is still not acceptable to me as fire commissioner. And there are a number of reforms that we've made and also just a number of cases that had been languishing for some time that I took immediate action upon when I got into this office, and I'll let our Assistant Commissioner for EEO speak to some of the details.
Thank you, Council Member, and good morning. Every time we receive a notification of a complaint or a notification of a mandatory reporter about a potential EO incident, we immediately triage it. That includes speaking with the direct members involved to figure out what the real-time situation is on the ground. Depending on how egregious the violation is or the potential violation, we might need to take immediate action. What I've worked very hard on in the last few years, and what I think we've been successful in, is working very closely with operations in order to effectuate immediate remedial measures on the ground before any further damage can occur. Very often, I will speak directly with the Chief of Operations, the Chief of Department, or a member within the chain of command directly so that we can get a real sense of what's happening and take any remedial measures necessary. Obviously, we have a dialogue with the complainant or victim themselves if they are reaching out directly to our office. There are any number of ways that a person can reach out to our office. That includes by a phone call, an email. Oftentimes, my attorneys on duties who have a phone 24 hours a day received a text message. We reach out to that member as soon as possible so that we can get a sense from them about what's happening and what's going on. Again, so that we can formulate immediate action if necessary. And that could include any number of things. If there needs to be some type of directive directly to the respondent or the person who's accused of wrongdoing, we might have a quick conversation with that person to inform them that there has been an allegation and that they are expected to maintain professionalism and act in conformance with the EO policy. We may work with operations so that we can work with the chain of command to ensure that the status quo is maintained in the meantime, so there's no further retaliation or discrimination. We do not move or remove the victim or the complainant themselves from their assignment in response to a complaint. that has been very important to us at the department so that a person feels like they will not be retaliated as a result of filing a complaint. In some instances, if a member does need to remove themselves or if they've requested to be removed from a situation, we have helped to facilitate that. Once we get past that initial triage, we actually, a supervisor within my office and ultimately myself, will review the specific facts of that case as we initially get them, right? When we first receive a complaint, we just have one side of the story in front of us. I review it, we make a directive in terms of any immediate action. If necessary, I brief the chief of department, chief of operations, or the fire commissioner, and ultimately I assign that case to an attorney. He will have that case from beginning to end. That attorney will be responsible for being the point of contact for the stakeholders within that case, and in particular, the victim or complainant. The attorney, in looking at that case, must plan that case from beginning to end so that we have a strategy in terms of determining whether, in fact, there's been a violation of the EO policy. We take very seriously our obligation to ensure that EO violations or potential EO violations are investigated thoroughly and efficiently. So that investigation plan at the outset will be submitted to myself within the first week of the assignment of that case. I will review it. If there are any edits or comments or modifications to that, we will do that. For instance, the allegation might include an alleged incident in which there were 5 members who might have witnessed the hostile event or the discriminatory event. So we want to make sure that we identify each of those 5 members, get their contact information, and understand what it is that we're seeking to get from each of these members. If there's any potential evidence that needs to be preserved or evaluated, we will take immediate steps to reach out to the necessary members or witnesses to obtain that evidence. And of course, we would get potentially a lot of that from the chain of command as well. Once that investigation plan is approved, I will track that case on a weekly basis with each of the attorneys who are assigned a caseload to ensure that the case is progressing as efficiently and as thoroughly as possible. And during those meetings, I want to understand, what are witnesses saying? How is the evidence looking? Are there any barriers in terms of making the decisions that we need to make at the end of the case? Because we understand at the end of the day that this is not only a compliance obligation mandated by federal, state, and local laws, but that these issues within the workplace are extremely critical and important for the people who have to deal with them on a day-to-day basis, whether they are a potential victim, a respondent, the witnesses, the officers overseeing it. I don't think it's a surprise to any member on this panel how closely our members work together, right? And how much of an effect an alleged, perceived, or real EO violation can have on the members that are involved in that. And not just the members involved, but the other members within the House as well.
Do you know, because I'm going to yield back to the chair, do you know how many complaints you had in 2021?
Yes. In 2020.
And what you're trending right now in 2022?
That are pending right now in 2022? Well, currently we have, in 2021, we received 76 complaints of alleged violations of the EO policy. Of that number, I don't have the exact number that are still pending to this date. We do take seriously our obligation to try to complete these investigations as quickly as possible.
I'm going to assume that nobody was fired, though.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to assume that no one was fired, was terminated because of any complaint last year, correct?
Although I cannot speak specifically to specific cases, I am aware of people who were terminated from employment as a result of a finding of an EO violation.
Last year?
Yes.
What about this year?
Yes.
As well, this year?
I'm sorry?
No, I'm just saying terminated this year as well. You do have, okay.
Correct,
Okay.
yes. Most of our employees are civil service employees, and attendant with that is due process protections.
Absolutely.
So even when we substantiate a potential violation of the EO policy, that member is still entitled to go through a disciplinary hearing process. And so, that we do have an investigations and trials unit that handles the discipline. We do provide them with a complete copy of the file as well as access to the attorney. And from there, that unit will handle any of the disciplinary measures that result from our cases.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for your testimony
Thank you.
today. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam. So as long as we're on the topic of complaints, so are members then cleared if the allegations are found to be false?
So commonly, thank you, Council Member, for the question. So commonly, there are three results from a complaint for a respondent. The allegations, if the evidence supports by a preponderance of the evidence that there was a violation of the EO policy, that would be substantiated against them. And I refer back to the process that I just discussed with Councilmember Adams in terms of referring that member to the disciplinary process. If the flip side of that is that if the evidence does not support by a preponderance of the evidence that an EO violation occurred, the EO office deems that unsubstantiated, which would mean that there was not enough evidence that made it more likely than not that a complaint could be proven. At the end of each case, I should begin from the beginning. At the beginning of each case, the parties, the complainant as well as the respondent, each get a letter from the EO office that details very specifically what the allegations are at the beginning, and at the end of it, what the findings of the investigation were after everything's been, all the evidence has been obtained, the interviews have been held, the report has been drafted and submitted to the fire commissioner.
Okay.
At the end of that, the respondent and the complainant receive a letter that would state if a respondent's, the claims against a respondent was substantiated or unsubstantiated. So in that sense, the members would understand and be informed that the complaint could not be substantiated against them.
Okay, would you know how many false or unsubstantiated complaints were made, or how many you get annually? So let's just take the last 2 years. We'll just take a snippet.
Sure. So in 2021, we investigated 76 complaints. The department EO office substantiated 31 of them, and the remainder of them were either unsubstantiated or administratively closed. In 2022, we still have a lot of cases pending, so these numbers are not going to be as up to date. We had 44 total complaints so far. So far, 11 of them have been substantiated. Only 7 of them have been unsubstantiated, and the remainder remain pending. In 2020, the EO office investigated, the number's a little bit lower due to the pandemic. There was a slight pause on investigations at the outset of the pandemic, but after we continued, we investigated 60 total complaints during 2020, and we substantiated 28 of them. So,
Sorry, 20 of them?
28 of them.
28, okay.
And the remainder of those numbers would have been unsubstantiated. So approximately 45% of the cases that we investigate department-wide are substantiated as EO violations.
I really want to thank you for having that information handy.
You're
Really.
welcome, Council Member.
And just, Commissioner, we're talking about diversity and building diversity within the department and outreach for diversity and women. And so I'd like to ask a question. How has the vaccine mandate affected the current members that are women and people of diverse backgrounds, and how many of them have been terminated or have been put on leave without pay?
So we have a very small number who have been terminated. Obviously, we don't like to see anybody terminated, but small in the perspective of our total membership. I believe it's 17. So it does not make it hasn't been a substantial factor in diversity at this point. Remains to be seen how those who are on leave without pay, where their cases may shake out. Many of them are still in the appeal process. So when that's complete, we could give you the total number and the breakdown by race and gender.
Great, thank you. I now turn the mic to our counsel, Josh Kingsley.
Thanks, Chair. First, we'll hear from Councilmember Riley, Councilmember Williams, and then Councilmember Powers.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Chair, again. Thank you, Commissioner, and to your team for your testimony. The first question I would like to ask is, what is the current demographic of racial and gender diversity within the fire department?
So currently our membership is approximately 72% white male, and well, white and 99% male on the fire side specifically, which, since that's what we're speaking to today, those are the numbers I'm sharing.
Is there,
I should mention EMS is significantly more diverse, but I think we'll get to that.
and do you have that number of diversity within EMS?
I believe it's approximately 30% women and approximately 50% non-white. Nafisa may have the exact numbers in front of her. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a language and ethnic background taken in consideration when placing firefighters into a firehouse after graduation?
So not exactly, but there is a portion of the modified remedial order, which is part of the Vulcan lawsuit that was settled, which does give city residents their first choice of assignment in the neighborhood or division that they live in. And that does have an appreciable effect on diversity in those neighborhoods, because most of the city applicants are quite diverse, and they are often they live in a diverse neighborhood, and that's often where they end up being assigned.
Can you please talk to the procedure of placement of firefighters in each firehouse?
Yeah, I'm going to let the chief of department speak to that.
Good afternoon. So we're talking about probationary firefighters graduating the academy?
Correct.
So there's a joint effort that goes on. It's between operations and the EEO office, and also the diversity advocate. Each probationary firefighter is given an opportunity to choose 3 divisions of which they prefer. If they choose as their first division, the division where they live, it's called the home division, that will be the first preference for that candidate. That assures that, as the commissioner said, that we do get, more diversity in some of these neighborhoods where they live. Beyond that, after we go through that process, the entire list of candidates and where they are going goes on to the EEO office, where it is looked at for disparate impact. And also, I will let Don get into the details on how that works.
Well, just for the sake of time, because Chair, if I may continue, just for the sake of time, thank you, Donna. When you talk about displacement, the reason I brought this up is because it was brought to our attention that many firefighters who are of color are placed in communities that there really isn't a lot of fire activity, which they aren't really pleased. So that's why I asked the question. So I just wanted to put that out there for the record. Speaking on EEO, as a part of the regular drills performed in the firehouses, are the firefighters required to do an EEO or diversity review during the year?
Yes. Each year, typically, each firefighter reports to the medical office for a physical once a year. At that physical, they have EEO training as part of that day.
Is it enforced by the officers or it's not?
Yes. In fact, it's required that they have that medical, so they will receive the training.
Okay. It has also come to the attention that a Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer hasn't been chosen yet. Is there a plan to choose a Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer by this year? And if so, is there a 6-month work plan for this officer when they are hired?
We did choose someone, we chose them over the summer. Unfortunately, they just needed a little bit of time to wrap up their work, and so they begin November 1st. I've already begun meeting with him regularly, and he is developing exactly that, a 6-month plan, so that when he arrives, he can hit the ground running. And he's an exceptional candidate, and I would really love for all of you to meet him when he's here.
Thank you. What do you see as the incoming top 3 goals for this officer?
For the CDIO?
Correct.
I think overwhelmingly the issues of climate that we're discussing, they are among the most challenging. The fire department, as many of you know here, is a very unique culture, and each firehouse is very unique. There's also a very lengthy kind of cultural norm of not speaking out outside of the firehouse, and that's what makes Commissioner Wynn's job particularly difficult. It's not just with cases that come to us, but it's often with the cases that never make it to us or make it to us late. So I would say that his primary focus of his effort when he comes in. He himself is a uniformed chief, and so I think that helps significantly. He also received his doctorate in this exact issue, will be for him to have a multi-pronged effort to tackle these issues in the firehouse and to find a better way forward to ensure unit cohesion, and that we are, I'd say, really getting ahead of the issue, not just waiting until cases come to us, but trying to find ways for early intervention to identify firehouses that may have an issue coming down the road and to find alternative dispute methods, especially in the cases where an EEO case is not substantiated, but that the investigation itself raises significant issues about the management or climate of the firehouse, even if those don't fall into the technical boundaries of an EEO case.
And Chair, I just have one more question. The fire department, do you guys have an Explorer program that's very similar to the NYPD
We do,
department?
yes.
You do?
We
Is
do.
there-
We are hoping to grow it. NYPD's is quite large. That's one of our strategic goals for the future. But we do have a program. We also have an NFDNY high school as well.
And do you guys plan on transitioning those cadets from the fire department to the fire academy? Because I think that would be an ideal way to address the diversity within our communities. So is there a strategic plan to actually take the Explorers from that program to actually transition them into the fire academy?
Yeah, there is. We actually have 3. We call them pipeline programs because they target youth early so that they can be prepared and show interest in this career early. Those are the cadets, the Explorers, and then the FDNY High School. And that is part of our strategic plan, is to increase all 3 of those pipeline programs directly into the academy.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Williams, followed by Councilmember Powers. Also, I'd like to recognize Councilmember De La Rosa. Thank you.
Thank you. Just have a few questions on recruitment. You mentioned partners. Can you talk about who your partners are? Because you said something about if your partners, you rely on your partners to inform you. So can you talk about who your partners are?
I may have been talking as it relates to community partners, which is vast, right? Whether it be schools or colleges or various community organizations that target Black, Hispanic, Asian women communities. That would probably be what I meant. If I was talking about partners as in terms of data, that would be, we work with KPMG, we work with Ideas 42, which is the Mayor's Behavioral Design team, and also our internal data and statisticians.
Okay, and now I'll move to just some questions on the bill, and just wanted to make a quick comment and statement that I do hope that the Chief Diversity Officer actually has teeth, because oftentimes I'm sensitive to tokenism. We put people in these positions, but they really don't have the power to change what's actually happening inside of particular organizations. So I do hope that he is deputized to make the change that you said you wanted to see, Commissioner, when he is fully on board. So a few questions about Intro 519. How often are female bathrooms inspected by the company officers?
So I just want to speak to that first part. I could not agree more. One of my first conversations with our new CDIO was that I wanted him to be part of the entire executive leadership team and not simply be siloed to a particular realm of diversity work. And I think that's a lot of where that tokenism comes in. Women and people of color are brought into leadership positions, but then only expected to work on a single item. And it was made very clear to him on the outside that he will be part of our leadership team. He'll be in all of our meetings. And one thing that will help with is hopefully he identifies other areas, other blind spots that we're not seeing outside of specific diversity programs where changes could be made. So I could not agree more. And I will have Commissioner Wynn speak to the firehouse and bathroom inspections.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Prior to the pandemic, the EO office conducted annual inspections of all firehouses and EMS stations.
Annually, every year?
Prior to the pandemic, yes. The pandemic interrupted that for quite a bit.
Okay, so since the pandemic, how often have you inspected the bathrooms?
Once a week or once every couple of weeks.
Okay.
Mostly because we're devoting a lot of our time to their investigations right now.
Sorry,
we've
for the
reallocated
interest
a lot of staff.
of time, because I think you answered it. Just can I ask you another question, like a follow-up to that? Okay, so we understand that keys to the women's bathroom, there's keys to the women's bathroom. How does the company officer secure the key to the women's bathroom so that only those members permitted to use the facilities have access?
I'm sorry.
So
can you-
how do you ensure the safety of keys to bathrooms?
Yes.
And ensure that only those who are permitted have access?
Sure. So the officer on, I'll yield the floor to Chief Hodgins, but the officer on duty is responsible for holding that key for safekeeping, and is only to hand it out upon the proper circumstances. And I'll yield the floor to Chief Hodgins.
Yes, the key is secured by the company officer. They're the only ones that have a key. Each female firefighter has their own key. And that's the way that they get into and the key works in every firehouse. It's a standard key. So if they're detailed to another firehouse, they still have their key that they can go into any bathroom, any female bathroom.
Okay, Commissioner, does the EEO office check for the placement of the key during the inspection of the house? Do you check for the key?
Yes, we check for the security of the female bathroom, and we ask the officer to see a copy of the key.
Okay, so I'll turn my questions to 560. When a member files an EEO complaint, we kind of asked this already, and I was actually just trying to get clarity. Are they removed, or is it they're not removed? Because you said something. Is it an option?
As a policy, we do not remove complainants for
The violator is not removed either, right? No one gets moved.
Oh, well, in certain circumstances, on a case-by-case basis, the respondent may be removed to ensure that there's no further incidents, to make sure that the workplace is comfortable, and to ensure that there's no further retaliation pending the investigation.
Okay, so we also have learned that the Vulcan Society has taken a vote of no confidence with the EEO office and the Bureau of Investigations and Trials. How are you addressing this? And if you could just talk a little bit about the staffing levels in your unit, and what number of days it takes for your unit to investigate and conclude. You answered this question, but if you could just talk about how your office is addressing the EEO office in terms of the Vulcan Society having a vote of no confidence in your office.
Sure. So I take very seriously any concerns, criticisms, thoughts about how my office is doing as it pertains to EEO compliance within the department. I make it a point to keep an open door. I have very often members contact me directly on cases about the concerns that they have, or their representatives. So whether it's during a vote, during an affinity group meeting, or on an individual basis, I take those concerns very seriously, because there's always going to be a room for improvement, right? And not nearly enough hours in the day for me to personally ensure that we're getting them done immediately. But it is a goal of our office and the department to address those concerns. We do have a monthly meeting with the Vulcan Society executive leadership, so I look forward to having that discussion with them and getting further details on the specific concerns. Of course,
the number of people in your unit?
The number of people in my unit, right now we have 9 people in my unit, including myself.
How many firehouses in the city?
More than 200, and more than 300 facilities total.
Can I say just one brief thing on that? I know we're running short, but I have undertaken in my brief time as commissioner a review of both units, including in particular the staffing, and also including a number of cases in which either EEO or BITS did order something to happen and it did not happen, that there was a direct opposition or violation in terms of following the EEO office's orders, and there is currently an investigation into a couple of cases where that happened, where the EEO office ordered something and those directives were not followed in the field.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. If we have more questions, I'll come back.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Powers, Hudson, and Feliz.
Thank you. Thank you to Chair Ariola and Speaker Adams, and thank you to Councilmember Riley and Williams for your bills. I think this is a really great and important hearing, and I have a few questions on some of the legislation we're hearing today. And I just wanted to, it's a week after 9/11, and I know we spend that day honoring everyone who serves the department, but I think it's a good opportunity just to say thank you to everybody in the department for the work they do every day. I have a lot of friends who are part of the department, and I know how great of a job it is, and I think that's why it is so important to have talk about diversity and opportunities. But today is a hearing on diversity and opportunity, and it's impossible for me to be at this hearing without acknowledging that we have the opportunity to make the first female commissioner in FDNY history. She's the acting commissioner right now. And we are talking about issues facing a workforce, including getting more women into this workforce. And I've seen that in some of my friends' firehouses, that increase and that progress. But we also are telling them that they may not have the opportunity to be the commissioner or to be in positions of leadership. And so I'm just going to implore, and by the way, that applies to anyone that hasn't traditionally been in the leadership of this department, who I think should be told that they can be represented at the highest structures of any department in any agency. And as we complete our promotions and appointments in this administration, I would make an appeal here again that it's increasingly important, especially as you're trying to make structural change and make deep-seated reforms into an agency, that you allow your leadership to have the mandate and the confidence to be able to do that by giving them the appropriate power, leadership, and titles to do that. So before I get into my questions, I would just make that public statement, because I think it's kind of impossible to have this conversation or this hearing without acknowledging what I think is an important part of the conversation, is that who represents and who leads the agency, not just who serves in the firehouses of it, and what they are allowed to believe about what their trajectory will be in that agency. So I'll just say with more confidence. In the last year, we've had the Bronx fire, we've had ongoing e-bike fires that I've been dealing with this agency about. We've had legislative issues that I've had to negotiate with the agency. I think Acting Commissioner Laura Kavanaugh has been excellent, and I think that the acting part of that title should be removed immediately, and I think she should be promoted to be the first woman commissioner in the history of the FDNY. And so with that being said, I wanted to just jump into a few bills with the little limited time I have left, which is just to say that we have heard from the agency in the past about projections that within the 3 or 4 testing cycles that the demographics of the department's firefighter ranks will reflect better the city as a whole. I would love to just get a projection on where we stand today with that goal and what the timeline is on that. Second is, when it comes to representation of female firefighters, do we believe there is a path, and what path are we on to increasing representation of that? And I'll stop my questions right there.
Sure. Thank you. And I think this is it's a tough question to answer, but I will talk about what we think we see and how I think we can try to get there. And I would say I think we'll need the assistance of everybody in this room to get there. The toughest part about the fire department, and you just mentioned it, it's a phenomenal organization that does great things, and one of the parts of that is we have one of the lowest attrition rates of any civil service job in the city, which means in any given 4-year cycle there are only a very small handful of jobs that are actually available. So even as we massively diversify these lists, we're still, only hiring a small number of the people on them. And so that makes outward projections somewhat difficult, because we are subject to just how many positions we have available and differing attrition rates. I'd also say COVID has thrown a real wrench into that. We had a pause on our hiring. So after we created this phenomenal list, we were then not able to hire off of it for quite a bit. So we are trying to relook at our numbers and try to figure out what the 10 to 15 year projection is now that we've gone through that. We certainly still hope that we can reach in a few cycles to match the demographics of New York City, but we do understand that when you look at the numbers, that is a very difficult challenge, because it would mean that you have to have significantly higher numbers of diverse firefighters on the list than actually are in the 21 to 29 age range. That doesn't mean we can't do it. It's just very difficult. One thing I would say we've spoken about here that both gives me hope and I think is one of the tactics is that we really see that it's a long-term effort for members of the community to interact with firefighters and to see, to your point, that it is possible for them to see people that look like them in these jobs does make a difference. And one of the really heartening things is that when we did our last recruitment campaign and we looked at the list, the numbers of people who applied jumped above our projections. And that was actually particularly true with young women, where I think that younger generations gratefully are thinking very differently about the jobs that are available to them. So when I first started, I very rarely met a woman who thought of firefighting on sort of the short list, and I now meet many young women who do. We think that tracks for diverse candidates as well. So what we're hoping is that as we do each recruitment campaign, we'll see that leap even above kind of the linear trend. We will see these leaps in interest as we are in communities, as people see many a first being made in this department, which I should say, you know, almost everyone up here and to my right is a first in their job and is breaking a ceiling, either an ethnic or gender ceiling or both in many cases. So we do hope all of those things makes a difference. It is somewhat hard to project given the civil service, you know, constraints that we're under, but we do hope that over the next few cycles we do see our ranks match what the city looks like.
Thank you. As you may, and I'll just add one comment and then I'll hand it back to the chair. As you guys are maybe can give us more clarity soon on just what that might look like in sort of more concrete examples, that would be helpful. Yeah. Thanks to the chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we'll hear from Councilmembers Hudson and then Feliz.
Thank you so much. Hello, and thank you for being here. I just want to reiterate what the majority leader said about, Laura, your leadership in particular, and I think having a woman at the helm of the fire department, which has never been done, would be significant. So I just want to also state that for the record. And I just want to follow up quickly to what Councilmember Riley said earlier. I think having firefighters of color in communities of color is not just simply about, you know, fighting more fires, but also about representing the districts and the communities that they're from oftentimes, and that so other people can see themselves reflected in the firefighters. And I would say, just as a policy point, if there's any potential for you to some way, somehow encourage firehouses to keep their doors up for at least a certain amount of time during the day. I visited Engine 234, which is in my district, and saw, you know, how impactful that is on local communities when people can walk by and see their heroes, their everyday heroes. So I wanted to get into a few questions. One is regarding the Fire Academy. How many firefighters of color or women or LGBTQ identified folks have leadership roles and training positions in the Fire Academy?
I'll let the chief speak to that a little bit. There are a number of them, including the diversity advocate themselves, which we think is very important. I'm just going to interject 1 second and say we are actually having an open house in October for all firehouses where we ask them to keep their doors up, and we could not agree more. We actually did a lot of that before the pandemic, and we're revisiting it, so we will get you that date, and we definitely agree in philosophy.
Great,
but in terms of the academy, you know, a number of our drill instructors and a number of the fitness instructors are women and candidates of color, particularly look for folks with military experience for those jobs, and the diversity advocate is an African-American male, and he is on site, and I'll let the chief of department speak to that a little bit further.
So we have, you know, jobs at the academy for instructor, and we have plenty of diverse and female, you know, firefighters working in those jobs. We always try to, you know, capture all different sides of you know, different perspectives coming from different people and learning the job. So I think it's important that probies see, you know, instructors that look like them as well. So that is, you know, we're very cognizant of that, and we strive to meet that goal.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't remember your title, but as follow-up to what you were talking about earlier in terms of the process for complaints and, I guess, discipline, I just wanted to ask, are there any Black women, women of color, or LGBTQ folks of color included in that process of reviewing allegations of harassment or abuse, and then also determining what potential discipline looks like?
So with regards to my office, and thank you, Council Member, with regards to my office, the majority of my staff members are female. We do have representation in terms of race representation and national origin representation. In fact, I'm one of the few males within my office. In terms of the Bureau of Investigations and Trials, they also share gender and race representation in their process as well. I should also note that as part of our, one of the challenges that we faced with the EO office is that we are in one spot, and I see you looking at the clock, I'll make this fast. We're in one spot, and we're responsible for firehouses and EMS stations all over the place. We have retained a group of EO counselors and liaisons who are members out in the field, who remain out in the field, but have been trained in EO policies, mediation, alternative dispute resolution, and they're also a gender and racial diverse group as well, who acts as a liaison between the EO office at headquarters and members out in the field.
Thank you. I asked that question because, diversity is obviously incredibly important. That's why we're here today, but also thinking about those of us who are most marginalized. For example, I am a gay Black woman, and so just to have a white woman necessarily, isn't always going to meet my needs. So I just want to make sure that people who are living intersectional lives also have the opportunity to be in those positions. And then lastly, what specifically does the fire department do to support members who are most marginalized, as I mentioned, such as Black women, women of color, and members of the LGBTQ community?
Well, there are various things that we do. It all starts with training. We train everyone on an annual basis with regards to their rights and responsibilities within the firehouses and EMS stations. We do conduct firehouse inspections to maintain a presence out there. Whenever there is an allegation of discrimination, retaliation, or harassment, we want folks to understand that we take those responsibilities seriously. And so we conduct very thorough investigations and speak to many people in order to make the right call. And we also maintain an open dialogue with the members out in the field to the extent that we can. Through the EO Liaison Program, through direct access to myself as well as my attorneys, and certainly during the course of an investigation, which can be very difficult for the people that are involved in that investigation, we give them contact information for all of us, including the attorneys, the point of contact, so that if they have any concerns, they can reach out to them directly.
Thank you. I think, I just wanted to bring that up because you all, I think the speaker actually shared the numbers earlier in terms of demographics, and I would say that, the allegations of abuse and harassment are disproportionately, part of the people who are least represented in the fire department. So it's really important that we continue to intentionally and deliberately support those people who are most marginalized. Thank you so much.
I'd like to add just 2 quick points on that. One is that when probationary firefighters are assigned out of the academy, we do identify probationary firefighters that may be particularly vulnerable in a firehouse, including we've had a number of members who are in the midst of, say, transitioning, or they may be the first female or first Black member in their house. And so Commissioner Wynn and the chain of command work together to understand whether or not there's a specific set of recommendations, rather than just placing them there, that we should be cognizant of before they arrive at the firehouse. And then I'd also say, part of my philosophy about making sure that I have a diverse executive staff myself is that exact reason. So it doesn't, not everybody's going to come to me or going to come to the chief, but that there's someone on my staff that someone feels is a safe person to relay a concern to. So those are 2 principles we're really trying to put out there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn, as long as we're on the subject of substantiated and unsubstantiated complaints, when you gave the EEO numbers, those included fire, EMS, and prevention?
Yes, across the agency.
So it's all the agencies. But when we spoke about diversity, did that also include all 3 of those components of your department?
I think we've gone back and forth. I know a lot of this was about the fire service, but I did mention the diversity in the EMS ranks at the beginning of this.
So that those numbers included all 3. The other thing is, you say you have 9 people in your department.
Including myself, yes.
Including yourself. What are you budgeted for?
We are budgeted for 19 at the
19. And what are you doing to recruit so that you can reach your budgeted amount of personnel?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So, I'm working directly with our Assistant Commissioner of Human Resources to publicize the position. I'm going through all my networks. I've had a long history of city service. I've been a city attorney in one form or another for the last 15 years, including at the law department. So I'm going through all those networks. We're going through LinkedIn, Indeed, places like that in order to find qualified applicants. And certainly I'm reviewing applications and interviewing people as quickly as I can to get back up to to full staffing.
And do you think that that complete disparity in number from the number of people you have now to the number of people you should be budgeted for and the inability to fill those slots directly affects those members of the New York City Fire Department, EMS, who are currently on leave without pay for almost 1 year come November, October and November?
For those members specifically, I do not believe that to be the case.
So you think 9 members in your department can oversee all complaints in addition to everyone who has in their waiver request who are currently on leave without pay, not having any income, and we don't have any timeline as to when they'll receive any type of response? I don't think that you have sufficient number of people in your department to really oversee what needs to be done there. So, I mean, you know, I'm saying it to be helpful, not knock your department, but we have a lot of people out there that have not had an income for almost a year. So, do you believe is the timeline with the 9 people you have to oversee these particular cases, to make sure they are either given an exemption, told that they are not eligible, so that they are able to then get back to work in another field or with the fire department?
Thank you, Council Member. At this juncture, we only have a very small number of pending internal exemption requests pending with my office. I believe that number is around 30 or 40 people at this point, and the great majority of them, in fact, I would say nearly all of them are folks who filed their application in the last month to 2 months.
That's not true.
Well, so there are folks that are still pending appeal, right? So once my office issues a decision, members, and if they are denied, they have the opportunity to appeal that decision to the citywide appeals panel, which my office doesn't have direct control over or have any contact with, so that they can maintain the integrity of their decision. I can't speak to their timeline, that they are not within my control.
It has to be your timeline. DCAS sets the timeline, and it's unfair to keep so many people without an income for so many months, just hanging in limbo without any type of ability to collect unemployment, get another job in the meantime, or receive any type of public assistance. So I think that you really have to look at your agency, make sure that you're working with HR to fill those slots, because then that means that there are people who have put in complaints from the LGBTQ community, from a woman, from people with diverse backgrounds, that also are backlog cases that are not being looked at. So it's just, you know, I don't see how you can sufficiently oversee with the number of people that you have testified to working in your agency right now.
I will say that we are working with the law department to find alternative ways to get candidates. It's not for lack of trying. This is one of the areas post-COVID where work has shifted, and there just are not a lot of candidates applying for legal jobs, not just in our agency, but citywide. And so we're working with the law department in part to figure out why that is, and if there are alternative ways to get candidates in, whether that's through internships, a contract with an outside firm. But we're trying to look at alternative methods, because there are just very few candidates applying for these openings. It's not a budgetary issue.
Right, but for this particular issue, it's about backlog on people who have put in complaints, and also people who are on leave without pay. Thank you. Councilmember Felice, thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am New York City Councilmember Oswald Felice. I want to start by thanking my colleagues, including Speaker Adams, Chair Ariola, Councilmember Riley, and Councilmember Williams for this very important hearing, and also for the very important bills before this committee today. Let me start by echoing what some of my colleagues mentioned today, which is, let me start by thanking the firefighters of this city for their service and their work. I represent a district with a very long history related to tragedies related to fire, and during every single fire and during every single tragedy, we've seen firefighters helping the people, risking their own lives to save people that they had never met. And the people of this city are very thankful for the service of each and every firefighter, thankful for their, again, service and for their work. I have three questions. One about the application process, another one about recruitment, and then about EEO complaints. Can you talk to us about the application process, including from the very initial step, including the timeline, training, any requirements for anything, including required exams? Yeah.
Sure. I can speak to that. Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's a long process, right? So the application process starts with filing. Candidates have a window of 1 month to up to close to 3 months, which is what we've done for the past exam. Considering diversity, we chose to extend the exam to try to increase a level of diversity. Once those candidates are filed, they are, DCAS puts them in list number order, and we hire based on the available slots that are available for the department. So far for this round of the exam, we've gone through 2 rounds of processing, right? So the first round was, I believe, 114 to 101. The second round of processing was for those candidates that had scored 100, and the next round will be for those candidates that scored 99, and we hope to get to 98 and possibly further, depending on the needs of the department. Once those candidates are called off the list, right, as I said earlier, once they're called and they're ready to be processed for the physical portion of the testing exam, they have 8 to 10 to 12, depending on how long, if the exam process is extended, 8 to 12 weeks of training with recruitment and retention at the Fire Academy, other sources of training and fitness programs available to them. They take and pass the physical exam, and then they go through the background processing. So they call in bands based on the ratio of candidates needed to fill a class. So a candidate, once they've passed the CPAT exam, could possibly go from 6 months to maybe a year before they're called for background processing. So once those candidates get into the academy, they're going through, once those candidates pass background and go into the academy, they will be in the academy from 18 to 20 or so weeks, and then they're into the firehouse. But the process for those people, depending on how far down you are on the list, can take time, can take anywhere from a year, 2 years, to 5 to 7 years, especially in this case where we have an extension. We had a filing period from in 2017, and this actual list doesn't expire until 2025. So that's quite a bit of time that someone can sit on this list before they're hired. So the challenge is for us to continue to engage these candidates, let them know how important it is to stay on top of their fitness levels, to read and stay abreast and monitor their emails that are coming from recruitment, and also DCAS and CID, and then that's pretty much what we do, and where we put all of that into a very compilated communication plan to make sure that we're not missing any of those groups.
So how long does it generally take to become a firefighter from the very first step until the very last step, which is when you're called? How many years, generally, average?
So it depends on on their scoring band. So I would say anywhere from 2 to maybe 6 years.
2 to 6 years,
on average.
Okay. Also, on the issue of recruitment, not the process for recruiting, but outcomes related to recruitment. How do the initiatives that we talked about earlier today, what have been the outcomes of those recruitment initiatives, and how do those outcomes relate to outcomes that we had 5 years ago, and outcomes on the issue of race and gender?
So, looking back at the physical portion of the firefighter exam and knowing that that's the highest point of attrition, so we have to look at what our candidates need in order to be successful. Participating in CPAT training is going to be key for these candidates, right? Not attending once, attending multiple times. I said earlier, 5 times CPAT training for our male candidates, at least 7 times for our female candidates, in order to see, in order for them to increase their chances of being successful at the physical exam. After that, they have to maintain that level of fitness, and in many cases increase it. And so we're offering programs to support those efforts and support those successes for those candidates. We do know, just preliminary information, our STEM program has been very successful. We've seen those candidates that have gone through the hiring process and have participated in our steerable training program, we're pretty much 100% successful, right? So we're going to, that gives us validation that we need to continue to roll out that program and continue to, you know, ensure that those candidates understand how important the stair mill is, not only for the CPAT exam, but also preparing for the medical portion of the background, and also throughout your tenure as a firefighter, you're going to be, you know, up and down the stairs. So that's something that we feel like we'll continue to do.
Okay, final question on the EEO issue. What is the department policy on keeping members apart whenever an EEO complaint has been filed? And has there been any instances where members work with someone who has filed a complaint or has been a witness to any complaint?
So I touched upon this, thank you for the question. I touched upon this briefly before. When we initially triage a case, we did determine whether the members are able to work with one another. Depending on the facts of the case, depending on whether the allegations are particularly egregious, or if we believe that there might be some type of threat of workplace violence or continued conflict, we might consider detailing the member pending the investigation. So it would depend on a case-by-case basis. During my tenure here, we have not suggested nor effectuated a detail of a complainant without some indication from that complainant that they preferred some other type of detail elsewhere, or a temporary relief from their workplace, you know, pending the investigation. So in that situation, we would try to maintain that dialogue, understand where they are, personally, professionally, emotionally, and try to make a call from there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No more questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Williams, do you have more questions?
Thank you so much, Chair. I just actually want to follow up, this is not my question, on what Councilmember Felice just asked. So all of the times that I've spoken to firefighters, they are so afraid to say something publicly or even file a complaint internally. And so his question is alluding to protection. And so if you can explain to us specifically what your department does around protecting people who do come forward and make complaints, because that's hasn't been clear. It's like, we can move them, we may not move them, we might detail. So if you can share with us what you do to protect people that are complaining or filing complaints.
Sure, thank you, Councilmember Williams. So again, we can't do this in a vacuum. We work with operations directly. If there needs to be an instruction given directly to the chain of command to maintain a professional workplace and to ensure there's no further retaliation, we give that command and directive. And so we keep that dialogue open with the chief of operations and everyone on down. If there is a situation where we believe there to be a threat of further EO violation, or if the underlying allegation is sufficiently serious, we will propose detailing, the respondent, in that matter to ensure that there's no, that we can maintain the status quo pending the investigation.
Okay, I'll just go for more questions for you before I go back to recruitment. Is the fire department currently in compliance with the terms of the Vulcan settlement? Are you in compliance?
Yes, yes.
Okay, can you share with us what changes to the exam and hiring process have occurred as a result of the Vulcan case? I believe I heard you mention it, but I'm not clear on specific changes that have been made.
Well, there have been changes to the actual written exam. There's been changes to the STEMO practice as it relates to portion of the medical background. We've made changes to our level of communication to the Black and Hispanic candidates. We've made changes to staffing levels. We plan to make changes for the next firefighter recruitment plan that we're working on right now based on the data that we've received from the past campaign and all the efforts that we've that have been undergone so far. I may be missing something, but we've also made changes to the way data is collected. The way data is collected for the candidate investigation division, the medical data that's collected to make sure that it's transparent and metricable.
Okay, do you have a specific recruitment plan for women candidates? I know we spoke a lot about racial demographics, but do you have a specific plan for women candidates? And are there any designated metrics for recruiting and retaining, again, specifically Black women firefighters, sort of following up to my colleague, Councilmember Hudson's point? These are subgroups that typically have tremendous disadvantages that Black men don't have and that white women may not have. And so how are you supporting efforts to recruit and retain Black women firefighters?
A lot of what we mentioned and the way we're communicating to these candidates are based on surveys and analysis that we've done. So our ability to say exactly how many sessions you need to attend is based on data that we've reviewed. We know specifically that for like our Black and Hispanic group of candidates, a majority of 18% of our Black candidates were women, right? So that's much higher than we can say for our group of white candidates, which may have been only 6%, or Hispanic candidates, which may have been 10. And I believe for Asian were 7. So we do have to look at the way those candidates will attrit, because we know that our female candidates are attriting at a higher rate, especially for the CPAT exam. So as we build out this blueprint for the next campaign, we absolutely have to zone in even further on how we're supporting our female candidates through the process.
Okay, and the last question is in reference to the EEO office. I just wanted to give the commissioner a chance to clarify statements, because it's been brought to our attention that, for instance, it was reported to the judge that you said you had 4 attorneys. Today you said you have 9. I don't know if everyone in your office is an attorney. Maybe you have other different types of positions. It was also reported that you said about 65% of your cases are backlogged, which gets to Chair Ariola's sort of position around the capacity. So if you can clarify what you said today, because you were sworn in, or any discrepancies in reference to what you have told the judge.
The 9 staff that I am speaking about work directly on the investigations or the reasonable accommodations. So that's myself, 4 investigative attorneys. There's a training attorney, an intake attorney, an analyst, and an RA person. So that's 9 people. There's a uniform member that assists with training and things like that, but they don't work directly on investigations. My recollection of the discussion with the court was this is in the context of where we were on our cases, and so that's.
And so, is it true that you have about 65% of cases that are backlogged?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. With that, we'll turn to the public testimony section of this hearing. So, Fire Department, you may step down. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the public section of today's testimony, we'll hear, to begin with, Regina Wilson from Vulcan Society and Jackie Michelle Martinez from the United Women Firefighters. We did 2 minutes. Regina's here, so I'll let her start, and then we could call Jackie. Hey, is Jackie Michelle Martinez here? Jackie, hi. So everyone, for public testimony, we're going to set a timer. So you're also welcome to submit written testimony that we'll review, but just wanted to give you all a heads up that we're going to set a 2-minute timer. You could finish your thoughts and all, but that's something for the interest of getting everyone's testimony today. We're trying to include that kind of protocol. So thank you. Either Jackie, Regina, one of you can go. Okay.
All right. Can you hear me? Now you can hear me. Firefighter Jackie Michelle Martinez, President of the United Women Firefighters. All right, I want to talk about Bill 560 that has to do with discrimination. Throughout the years from the original women entering into the fire department in September 25th, 1982, there were 41 original women that came onto this job from a class action lawsuit. Subsequently, the racial breakdown of that class is 12 women were African American and 1 was Hispanic and the rest were Caucasian. In that group of 41, they've endured a great deal of harassment, poor treatment, ill treatment, and that treatment has showed its face in different ways throughout the years, up to present time. So when EEO says that there are, let's quote that correctly, there were 2021, that only 2021, 76 complaints, which include EMS. Women historically feared to contact EEO because majority of their cases when they are brought to EEO are found unsubstantiated, meaning there's no penalty, no one gets in trouble, nothing happens, and that woman is labeled a pariah. She is treated unfairly. She, receives tons of backlash, and whatever firehouse she decides to transfer to, it doesn't matter. She is still treated and labeled poorly. People call other firehouses to talk about her. So if there's an injustice happening to a woman on this job, she does not say much. And the one woman that's brave enough to speak then is treated poorly. So the UWF supports that bill. In the motion for the facilities, the reason why, I'll point to firefighter Regina Wilson, she spearheaded with the Brooklyn Borough Commander to have this actual key being for women firefighters, that the bathroom is locked. She petitioned to have it closed, and that the only time that a male firefighter can enter a female bathroom is to clean it, because we have committee work being done, right, during the hours from 10 to about 11, it's committee work being done to keep the firehouse up to standard, right? So all the rooms in the firehouse, from the kitchen to the bathrooms, need to be cleaned. So the women's facility, that's the only time a male can enter it from that actual regulation, right? So there's a female key, and it says FB on it, female for female bathroom. Every female firefighter has one, right? And we can access any facility, but not every firehouse in the city of New York has a female bathroom. So in changing with the laws, they put a gender-neutral bathroom on the first floor, but there's not a facility in every firehouse for a woman. That being said, as well as the male, there's no changing area. There's a bathroom for women, so we have to change and use the bathroom in the same spot. Right? The males, they have a locker room, which really isn't a locker room. It's usually a walkway, which majority of them are uncomfortable, and they don't even have a changing space themselves. And then there's their bathroom, that women who are probies clean it, and women who are doing committee work clean as well. But we do not defile their bathrooms. And in an instance, the reason why the female bathroom / locker room was locked is because their facilities were being vandalized, used, people not flushing the toilets, not cleaning it, when there is, things that occur in the fire department. If someone used to come in that was off the street, they were allowed to use the female bathroom. So it was reasons why there were steps put in place to have it locked. And to answer your question, Councilwoman Williams, you said that, is there safeguarding? The key is supposed to be safeguarded by the company commander, meaning in their office on duty is supposed to be locked, and people are not supposed to have access to it, and they're supposed to ask that the officer on duty to have the key to clean it. So the reason why this was put into place was because before it was not being cleaned, it was left dirty, and the poor woman who would come back, say coming from a vacation, would be subjugated to finding a disgusting facility where her stuff is placed. So that is the reason why that was done was because women were being subjected to it, in all races. Caucasian women, women of color, they all were subjugated to that treatment. So Regina, firefighter Regina Wilson, made it her mission to have it in writing in our regulations. As for recruitment, majority of the great influx of recruiting, meaning recruiting women specifically, the increase really came, our numbers, going to 1% where we are now, just a little over, to 131 women from the original women in 1982 for 41 women, was from the promotional, EMS promotional exam. We yielded the most number of women. And the last EMS promotional exam was the same time as the open competitive in 2017 and was given in 2018. The EMS promotional exam has now expired, but yet from the Vulcan lawsuit still ongoing and the practices with the court monitor, Jeff Garifas extended the 2018 exam for firefighter, open competitive 7501, and to 2025, whereas the EMS promotional still has not been given. It has expired, it has been expired, there's no extension to them. And there's no prospect of giving another promotional exam. As you heard, EMS has 30% women. So it would behoove us to have another promotional exam. And since COVID of 2020 eradicated the possibility of having an upcoming promotional exam, the age should be increased just for the EMS promotional to 35. How do you call it a promotional if there's an age cap? So the age, let's be clear, council, member of council, city council, the age is 18, right? 17 and a half, you could take it, to 28. 29 is you cannot have reached your 29th birthday by the first day of filing. So everybody likes to say 29, it's really 28. Right? And now, because of COVID, there's tons of women that would probably take this exam from the promotional and will be too old to actually take this exam, which is a disparity on us. It took us a lot of years to get to 131 women out of a workforce of 7,000, that's roughly, I'm not even counting the offices. So if you count the offices, roughly around 9,000 and some change. Right? So we've been working tirelessly with recruitment. The United Women Firefighters over the years with the many different presidents have worked tirelessly to try to engage, and we offer a free training program to get women to where they need to be. But if the promotional allowed us to get a greater number of women during that process. So I don't want you to forget, and I know the last time Councilwoman Ariola, you spoke to the commissioner, she alluded to the fact that the promotional exam was just given recently. It wasn't. It was given at the same time as the last open competitive in 2018. So it has been a great amount of time, and in actuality, we could be increasing our number of women, female firefighters, with the EMS promotional exam. I want to touch upon, again, about women in the facilities. You know, many different women experience the bathroom experience, but it should not be up to a woman to decide on the experience. What does that mean? That means she should have a safe place to change, use the bathroom, and her stuff not be tampered with for whatever reason. Now, another thing, I forgot this part of the bill. I forgot which actual number the bill is, and if one of the speakers can clarify this. It's based on, let's see if I remember. I'm so sorry. Oh, that's nerve-wracking. I was nervous. Wait. I had it. Safety in the firehouse for women. So there's a portion about safety, women feeling safe. So there have been, throughout the years, women have transferred from one firehouse to another. I would not be remiss not to discuss that. So there have been women who felt that they couldn't do an EEO, or they did do an EEO and they transferred. That doesn't mean their treatment was treated well after their transfer. Some were successful, they found a home and was treated well by men who treated them well, not boys, and they were treated well. But some women, unfortunately, carried the stigma of filing an EEO. And so I want not to be remiss that does occur. And there is no protection because nothing is a secret in the fire department. I'll give you an example. When you walk through the building of 9 Metro Tech to go see the EEO office, you go to security. Security now makes a phone call, and there's other people standing online to hear where you're going. Now, the next person behind you can clearly hear, after they ask for your ID, that you're going to the 4th floor. So the 4th floor houses 2 things, EEO and recruitment. They don't know if you're going to, go ahead.
No, Jackie, I was just going to say, your advocacy is second to none, but we're just going to ask you to wrap up.
Oh, I'm done.
You're done.
No, okay, I'll just finish this. It's just going there for anybody, it is very daunting, right? For them to make the call to actually go to EEO, that firefighter is actually very, very brave. Because after the time they leave, the amount of things that are said about that person, and then to find out that your ill treatment in the firehouse is now non-substantiated, meaning that person gets away with treating you poorly. And that gives an idea that everybody else can treat you poorly going forward.
Thank you for your testimony, Jackie.
Regina, go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Regina Wilson, and I am the past president of the Voca Society, an affinity organization of African American uniform and civilian employees of the FDNY, and a 23-year veteran of the department. I want to thank you all for your time and the opportunity to come before you to discuss and support the 5 pieces of legislation regarding evaluating diversity and inclusion in the FDNY. Many years ago, the Voca Society met with the Legislative Office of Speaker Corey Johnson to discuss hardship members of the department were experiencing on a consistent basis dealing with discrimination, harassment, racism, and sexism in the FDNY. Members are still experiencing racist materials on their lockers, transfer papers left on their lockers, designed to make them feel unwelcome in their firehouses, tampering with food and gear, racist memes shared out via firehouse group chats, sexual assaults of male and female members, egregious hazing, and bullying. When the Voca Society is made aware of these issues, we send our members to the EEO office within the FDNY. Yet over the years, we heard from many members that they were displeased with the office work. Members waited several weeks to hear back from EEO officers and waited many months to find out that the harm they reported and received was found unsubstantiated. The Voca Society addressed these matters with the EEO office and pushed the office to align its work with the city's EEO goal to reach their determinations within 90 days. Unfortunately, the EEO office recently reported to the court that it is grossly understaffed and 65% of their cases are open over 90 days. One member has not heard from the EEO office in 6 months, and their case remains unresolved. This failure in the system has caused great harm to the members who have once again lost their faith in the EEO office and the ability to resolve case efficiently. Many members use the EEO office as an internal checkbox, but seek justice outside the walls of the FDNY. Many members have expressed frustration regarding cases found unsubstantiated by EEO because the EEO officer could not identify the person or persons who committed the violation. But many times evidence provided proved that something did occur and there was indeed a violation to the EEO policy. The officer has indicated that it was now substantiated, the office has indicated that it now substantiated these cases, but indicates that that bad actors could not be identified. Unfortunately, the EO office rarely takes measures to correct the behavior in the firehouse, leaving the act unpunished, making it destined to happen again. These behaviors across the department create a hostile work environment, which cause many members not to want to come to work, take full-time details outside of their firehouse to escape the trauma, turn to drugs and alcohol, and many times suffer in silence. These behaviors are embedded into the culture and a part of the system of the FDNY. For these reasons, the Volk Society held a meeting and its members took a vote of no confidence of the EEO office and the Bureau of Trials and Investigation. This introduction to the toxic FDNY culture begins with probationary firefighter school. Instructors tell probationary firefighters that they must assimilate. They try to strip probies down from who they are as a person, how they think and believe, and to accept abuse, bullying, and hazing as a normal part of the job. Cruelness is not foreign to those who perform the act because they themselves have experienced it in one form or another. They have just been so brainwashed to believing that tearing each other down is a part of the job. Training people to think as a team and not as an individual to be a firefighter need not come with the cost of giving up your identity as a person, dignity, and self-respect. No job deserves to take that away from you. Being a woman or a person of color in the FDNY can be one of the hardest things you can experience. Not only are you entering a department that historically has not welcomed women of color, but the very design of firehouses never welcomed women. For a few examples are, the firehouse did not have bathrooms in every firehouse until 2016, after years of the UWF battling with the department regarding bathrooms. The first female firefighters entered the firehouse in 1982, and this year, on the 25th of September, will mark the 40th anniversary since the first woman has entered the department. Most bathrooms are not designed to accommodate more than one woman. Designated bathroom keys are given to female members of the FDNY and company officers for access to the bathroom. Often the keys given to the officers are not secured at all, regardless of what they say here today. They are not secured. I, at one point, went to a firehouse and found the key inside the door. I also found the key on a wire hanging outside of the door. So these keys are not always secure. And the firefighters in the firehouse knows where the keys are to the women's bathrooms. You'll walk into some of these bathrooms and you'll see men's shampoo. You'll see their shaving kits. So you know that they've left traces of themselves behind, as well as not keeping an adequate bathroom for women. So for it to be said that every firehouse, the keys are secure, is a false statement to make. Female bathrooms in firehouses with no female firefighters assigned to them, even though female firefighters may be detailed to their firehouse at any time, are often converted into storage spaces or used in other ways to conform the male firefighter in the firehouse. I've gone to a firehouse in Manhattan and they use the women's bathroom to store T-shirts that they sell to the public. It was stocked up and you could not even get to the commode. Bunk rooms are open spaces that do not have sections of privacy. I no longer rest in the bunk room after I witnessed a male firefighter putting his pants on after taking them off to lay down in bed. Former Commissioner Nigro once stated that the FDNY should have a department of 15% women, to which I totally agree. But since that statement until present, the fire department has not created a plan to create those numbers or an exclusive plan for recruitment and retention for women. Councilmember Williams asked that question today to the fire department, and they did not answer that question, and that's because they have no plan specifically for any woman or any woman of color. The fire department must still work to create an atmosphere of acceptance for women candidates and firefighters that is free of bullying, sexual harassment, and hazing. Regarding the diversity and inclusion officer, this position was created as part of the Volk Society settlement with the city. The position has yet to reach its full potential to challenge the dynamics of the FDNY. The last two CDIOs failed their jobs. The position is currently vacant, and the unit today is not making a significant contribution to make the FDNY more inclusive and a more inclusive environment. The unit has not dealt with the systemic racism of the department or addressed any of the women's issues stated previously in my statement. No department-wide plan or true measure of metrics of success to achieve diversity and inclusion has been produced. We need an overhaul of this unit's practice and a new direction for the office that adopts goals and sets expectation. This position has been vacated for 14 months, leaving the department again without the work of essential positions and functions, which has been created out of the lawsuit. These are court-appointed positions that have been left open for 14 months. And in those positions, they put senior staff members who do not have a background in diversity and inclusion, nor have they done that in their previous career, or is it listed on any part of their resume. The department has onboarded someone to start at the end of the year, and setting goals and expectations so that this office can finally realize its potential is essential. In conclusion, I've been with the fire department for 23 years, and I have watched so many members struggle to maneuver their way through the fire department system. When will the day come when we will not have to battle for basic rights and treatment in the workplace? When will people of color, women, and citizens of New York be afforded the same opportunities as others? If you look at the history of the fire department, it has never been a willing organization of inclusion for anyone other than white males. The changes in the department has primarily come due to lawsuits where discrimination was at the very heart of the exclusion. To change the FDNY, we need strong leadership committed to making systemic overhauls. During the last administration, the Vocal Society and the United Women Firefighters Association met with many members of executive staff from the Commissioner, Commissioner Nigro, the First Deputy Commissioner, Legal, the Bureau of Trials and Investigations, EEO, and others. Progress was made, but not enough to change the very nature of the deep-rooted issues which plague the department. Some have blamed the former Commissioner Nigro for preventing members from executive staffs making the necessary changes to the department. They said the issues the department were plagued They saw the issues the department was plagued with, but felt unheard, ignored, or silenced. I say to them, look at the brave people who will be testifying here today. They will give all of themselves today, even with fear of retaliation looming over their heads. They come to tell the truth and advocate for change. They speak on what is wrong with this department and seek the necessary help from the City Council to fix it. I say to them, you should have done the same. For all the political clout and influences afforded to the FDNY leadership, you should have been just as brave as these members and should have taken the stand for what is right. To them, I say your silence makes you complicit to all of the bad behavior. I say to you, you cannot separate yourself from any of it, but I also say it is not too late to step up and do what's right and join the Vocal Society and City Council in ensuring the FDNY's future is inclusive. I urge them to begin today, and I encourage Council to pass this package of legislation and will help to hold the department accountable for these changes with the stronger amendments of accountability added. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you both.
Can I just add one thing? In a correction, the EMS promotional exam is given 6 months before the open competitive. So that EMS promotional exam, the written was given in 2016, and their CPAT was given, the first date of their CPAT was 2017. So it's even longer. There hasn't been an EMS promotional. And to cover one more thing about the vaccinated, when the mandate first occurred, more than 50% of the women were unvaccinated for many different reasons. And like you said, backlog, like a lot of people did not get a response. So they took the vaccine under duress and fear of losing their job. There were women that were pregnant. They didn't want to take it until after their pregnancy and still get a response. And even if we lose one woman is more than enough because we only have 131 women. We would have had 132. One had to retire in lieu of being terminated. And there's one on LWOP now, and that's more than what we need because we hardly have women on this job. So, their religious exemptions were not even explained, and they were just told randomly, generically, that, you know, it's been denied.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear, thank you.
I'm sorry.
I said, unless there's other questions from members of Town C, thank you for your testimony. We'll move on.
Okay,
to the
thank
next
you.
item.
No. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Bobby Eustachi from the UFA. After that, we're going to turn to some Zoom testimony from Brenda Berkman at UWF and Serena Sariscal, also at UWF.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. My name is Bobby Eustace. I'm the Vice President of the Uniform Firefighter Association. We heard wonderful testimony today. I want to thank all the council members for being here right there. I want to kind of touch on a hearing we had last week as far as the Civil Service Committee, as far as hiring, and touch on a lot of different testimony that was here as well. When I was hired, I was the 4th class that was hired one year. Currently, we hire about 2 classes a year. That seems to be one of the issues here. They talk about all the efforts and diversity that they do here. They need to hire a lot more classes. We're currently at an all-time historic overtime hiring, and Firefighter Martinez touched on it, that the EMS promotional exam, those are facts. That's one of our strongest strengths of diversifying our department. They need to have another one of those exams. They need to get it through. We touched on this when DCAS made a couple statements that I want to echo on there. They said that, you know, civil service is the path to the middle class, and I believe that. And part of the thing that we're skipping is the path part. We keep seeming to want to raise the floor up, and that's something I want to echo as a union leader here and a labor leader here, is that we keep wanting to raise the floor and not the path. You want to give people in neighborhoods, in minority neighborhoods, something to achieve, not the floor. You know, the city council gave themselves a raise of 32% in 2016, and I'm hearing they're going to give themselves a raise pretty soon. I ask every politician I interview what's the middle class makes in New York City, you know, because it seems to be a tale of two cities, you know, and if $32,000 is minimum wage, and there's a lot of millionaires in this city, you know, my belief is $150,000 is just barely getting by in this city. So we need to give something to strive, not something to barely get by. So we need to give our affordable wages so that people can live in their communities. Because what I happen to find is that a lot of people come from neighborhoods like Soundview, and the cost of a home in a Soundview might be $1.2 million. I mean, if you buy an actual house in your neighborhood and you want to stay in these communities, my members have 3 years on, they come from these communities and they have to move to Mount Hope. They don't want to move to Mount Hope in Orange County. They don't want to move to Kings Park in Suffolk County, but they end up leaving these communities and they don't get to stay there. And the best recruitment for a job is someone on the job. They talk about the job fairs, they talk about opening the doors in the firehouse, but the best recruiting for a job is someone who's already on the job. And you need someone who's positive and happy and in this role. So let's not raise the floor anymore. Let's raise the ceiling. Let's try to give affordable wages so our members can live in their communities and recruit members in their communities. That's what I asked for today. I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Eustace.
Thank you. With that, we'll turn to some online testimony. We'll go to Brenda Berkman, Serena Sriscoe, and then we'll go to Oren Barzilay. Brenda, if you're, bear with me for a second.
I hope I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're muted. Go ahead.
Great. Good morning, and thank you very much for allowing me to submit testimony today. I appreciate that the hearing has gone very long, and unfortunately, a lot of council members had to leave. So I'll try and reduce the amount of time that I take, but I have submitted written testimony. My name is Brenda Berkman, and I was the sole named class plaintiff in my successful sex discrimination lawsuit, Berkman v. Koch, which 40 years ago resulted in a hiring in September 1982 of the first 41 women FDNY firefighters, including myself. Just to skip through my various ranks and qualifications, just to say that I have 40 years of experience and advocacy on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm a subject matter expert in this field for the fire service. If you don't know the history of misogyny, harassment, sexism, racism, and lack of opportunity experienced by the first group of FDNY women firefighters, please be assured that the legacy of that discrimination and that experience by earlier men of color continues in today's FDNY. Illegal, unprofessional, cruel, immoral behavior has been and continues to be normalized in the department and ignored. Women were and are just expected to put up with it. If we complain, we were and are retaliated against, and the perpetrators are rarely punished. The real culture of the FDNY doesn't change. In fact, some of the very men who were bad actors when I was coming on the job as younger firefighters have been promoted, excuse me, and put in positions of authority today in the FDNY. My first testimony regarding the lack of gender equity in the FDNY occurred in 1982 before the late Councilwoman Miriam Friedlander's Women's Committee. And I've continued to regularly testify before the council on FDNY women's issues ever since, 40 years. Consistently, I and others have called for much more serious oversight of the FDNY by the New York City Council regarding gender and racial disparities. I'm hopeful that this legislation, perhaps even made stronger than in its current form, is going to help with finally allowing the New York City Council to have serious oversight of the FDNY. But it's not enough to have laws and regulations on the books or flowery proposals by the FDNY, some of which we've heard of today. These are empty words on a page unless the council demands transparency and truth in reporting. And I heard a number of mistaken statements today, and holds the agency accountable for its failure to dramatically improve its treatment of women firefighters. Accountability is something that has really been lacking in the New York City Fire Department. And, the council has the power to make the administration accountable. With every change in administration, the women firefighters and women advocates have offered concrete suggestions for improvement to the city and the FDNY. Sometimes a suggestion might be adopted briefly. For example, a cadet program, which has come and gone and seems to be back again, but then that suggestion's dropped, and even when it's shown to have promise for improving gender equity, it's dropped. At other times, good suggestions, often based on programs around the United States, are simply ignored. Even when some improvements are made, for instance, some of the training protocols at the Fire Academy have improved somewhat. Some gains for women and people of color are immediately attacked and then even rolled back. I stand in awe today of the active duty firefighters who are willing to tell the truth about the FDNY. I know that they file their complaints and they testify at great risk of retaliation. I experienced that myself. These legislative proposals are good first steps for the council and for New Yorkers to learn about the true situation regarding gender and racial disparities in the FDNY. All the FDNY and the communities they serve, women and men alike, will benefit from a more diverse and equitable fire department, a professional fire department. The council will need to closely monitor the compliance of the FDNY with this legislation and hold leadership accountable for failures. Having 138, I've heard various numbers today, 131 women out of 11,000 firefighters, 115 of which have been hired in the last 9 years, which, although an improvement from many years of 0 women hired, is still less than 13 women per year. Hardly a situation our city can accept in 2022. I'd be happy to work with the council along with my active duty sister firefighters to make this legislation strong and effective. Thank you for your attention. Please let me know if you have any questions or need additional information.
Thank you so much, Brenda. We appreciate your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Serena Sarisco, followed by Orrin Barzilay. Serena, I will unmute you in just a second. You may go ahead.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Okay, great. My name is Serena Sarisco, and I'm a fire lieutenant in the FDNY. I'm also the first Asian woman firefighter in New York City, and I was also president of the United Women Firefighters from the years 2013 to 2019. Currently, there are 137 women firefighters and officers in New York City, which is about 1.25% of the force. And the numbers keep increasing as there are additional women on eligibility lists for hiring. There has been an increase in the numbers of women, like Brenda just said, 115 women hired since 2013 out of 137. But despite this development, the department still has done nothing in terms of gender integration. Nor has the department developed any real plans for increasing the numbers of women firefighters for the future. Women are hired, placed in firehouses where oftentimes they're the first or the only woman there, and it's up to them as rugged individuals to be able to survive and navigate in a world where we are the super minority. As a result, as stated before, we have women who left the firehouses and are working offline, or who have transferred to other firehouses due to the harassment they have faced at work. For example, we've had women who have intentionally been shown porn at the firehouse, women whose rear ends have been slapped, women's bathrooms, as stated before, being used by men and left in filthy conditions, women who have been bullied, ostracized, and isolated, and many times these women's supervisors are the culprits. What's worse is not much is done to their abusers, and to avoid working with them again, the burden is on the victims to leave the firehouses. Oftentimes these women are afraid to report the harassment because they fear the retaliation might be too unbearable. Or, you know, they also fear that nothing will be done once they go to the EEO office. There's no confidence, generally speaking, in the EEO office having any results on people's cases. The 40th anniversary of women firefighters being sworn to FDNY is this Sunday, and it's very disheartening to see that many things remain the same in terms of harassment. Also disheartening that in 40 years, we're only able to increase the number of women firefighters by 96. According to experts, the benchmark for a fire department that has no barriers to entry for women is 15% of the workforce. FDNY continues to rank among the worst in gender disparity in the country, when as a progressive city, we should be leaders. I think we are the second worst out of all the major cities in the United States. I have 17 years in this department, and I cannot tell you how many times I've walked through open locker rooms to get to the office or anywhere else I need to go in the firehouse, and I've walked into guys who've been changing. When I was president of the United Women Firefighters, I advised the FDNY many times to purchase dividers as a cheap and effective way to divide up the bunk room to make women feel more comfortable. Having separate bunks is standard in every other fire department in the country. It's standard in the military, it's standard even in NYCC ESU, but the FDNY continues to do nothing. We currently have women who lie on yoga mats in the cramped women's bathrooms during their night tours because they're uncomfortable with being the only woman in bunk room. The other issue I would like to address is recruitment. In the past 5 years, there have been only a handful of women's events done by FDNY recruitment. I think this year we only had one. There doesn't seem to be a plan for recruiting more women, and I haven't seen anything much for women at all. Only a couple of events are done for the year, usually for publicity or tokenizing reasons. This year was just Women's History Month, and there's no long-term presence for having like women events, women targeted events or anything like that. From speaking to women candidates and women probationary firefighters, I know there's nothing concrete and effective that is being done by the FDNY to help these young women get to the finish line of becoming a firefighter. There seems to be no plan for hiring and retaining women, and it doesn't seem like the FDNY is taking this as a serious issue at all. Like Bobby said, currently we have a staffing crisis. We have lost a lot of members due to the vaccine mandate, and also because of COVID, hiring took a temporary pause, and it's really hard to fill that void back up. But despite the tremendous need for new firefighters, there have been examples of women and probationary firefighters of color who are flunked out of fire academy for stringent and unfair reasons. One man of color didn't graduate due to his average and missing the mark by a quarter of a point. The FDNY failed one woman who would have probably been our first Mexican-American woman firefighter due to half a point. When I spoke to the chief of department at the time, he said, well, she can try again. And when she tried to try again, when she tried to re-enlist through DCAP, they told her that she wasn't allowed to get recycled for no reason. Just, she was half a point away, you know? In the past, people were able to graduate, but still stay back for a week or two to complete their graduation requirements if they're failing in some subject. This practice has been out the window for years, probably since the Vulcan lawsuit settlement has taken place. The lawsuit really does not cover a fire academy. It really doesn't. So the FDNY did change graduation standards to be much harder than in the past. Today, it makes no sense that during a staffing crisis that the FDNY is throwing away potential firefighters over fractions of a point. The city spends so much money on each of these people, on their training, on their uniforms, and their paychecks while they're in fire academy. It's a waste of resources to fail to see these trainees through to graduation. Although strides have been made in increasing the numbers of women firefighters in the fire department, more still needs to be done. The bar that the FDNY held for the standard of our treatment was so low, it was in the basement. Now we are in 2022, we must do better. We've tried many times to work with the fire department on the issues that were talked about all day today, but the fire department chooses not to take any of these concerns seriously. It is out of many years of frustration that we come to the council for help. Thank you so much for listening to our stories, and I hope this is a start for a long overdue change. Do you want to add one more thing? You know, most of my prepared testimony was talking about experiences of women firefighters, but as an Asian person, I do want to say that from the recruitment aspect, Asians get very few recruiting events for the year. The fire department hosts block parties, the mobile academies that are talked about, all these other programs, and it's not done very much in Asian communities. We're kind of an afterthought for diversity and recruitment in the fire department. It's taken so long to also increase the number of Asian Pacific Islander firefighters in New York. This year was the first time we had our first South Asian woman firefighter hired. It's just 2022, it's just too long to have these firsts happen. And with the language and cultural aspect, it is really important that our fire department looks like what our city looks like. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, Serena. Next, we'll hear from Orrin Barzilay, Michael Greco, and Arlene Simmons, followed by Lewis Holmes and Anita Daniels. So we'll start with Orrin. I will unmute you on the Zoom. Just bear with me.
I can go?
Yes.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Orrin Barzilay. I am the president of Local 2507, representing 4,000 uniform EMTs, paramedics, and fire inspectors. I want to first thank the Speaker for her long commitment on this issue, as well as the Chair of the Committee on Emergency and Fire Management. Local 2507 supports the proposed bills discussed today. They will provide important data to help hold the department accountable. But to solve the problem with lack of diversity in the FDNY, we must end the practice of this disparate compensation for FDNY's first responders. Some may say pay equity is a different issue, but it's not. It is central to the issue of diversity in the FDNY because as long as there is a system of haves and haves not, those who have will work to maintain that status quo. To understand the problem, we can't just look at the demographics of firefighters. We must also look at the demographics of EMS and the way the department treats these first responders of disparately as to the compensation and prestige, despite being an integrated department. Today, the challenge is no longer just a discriminatory barrier to entering the department. While that still exists, as the statistics shows, more diverse recruits are entering the FDNY. The problem is that they are only allowed on the EMS side, where they are paid significantly less, allowing the department to continue its practice of exclusion. Since 1996, the FDNY has operated as an integrated department, dispatching firefighters and EMS to the same emergencies. Despite responding to the same emergencies, facing similar risks on the job, and respectfully handling 90% of the 911 calls, EMS is given only 14% of the budget and paid a fraction of the salary of our colleagues on the fire side. This in no way means our brothers and sisters on the fire side should not be compensated as they are, and we highly respect their heroic work. What does this mean, however, is by letting women and people of color into the department, but only placing them on the EMS side while greatly reducing pay and benefits for that side. The department is able to claim they are diversifying the department while perpetuating the underlying problem, which is the lack of equal employment opportunity. It is no wonder that even with the court oversight, the department has been unable to diversify the department despite its recruitment efforts. As you will hear from Deputy Chief Simmons, the recruitment efforts focusing on diversity, some of which have been discussed today, do not actually achieve those results. In order to solve the problem with diversity, we have to stop the department from segregating its first responders by removing the extreme difference in pay, benefits, and resources. This will remove the incentive and motivation to exclude women and people of color from one side of the department and funnel them to the other. It is also the right thing to do. Thank you for all your hard work on this issue.
Thank you, Orrin. Michael, you may go next. Michael Greco.
If I can add, Daryl Chalmers is part of our panel. I don't know if he was not mentioned.
Yeah, no, he could go as well. So, Michael,
okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Michael, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Michael Greco. I'm the Vice President of Local 2507. I just want to say good afternoon. I want to pick up where my president, Mr. Barzilay, left off. To reiterate, Local 2507 supports the proposed bills discussed today, and we also ask this committee consider seriously how pay inequity directly impacts the effort to diversify the FDNY. Year after year, the department appears before this body trying to convince it that hiring 70 women is a big step forward in a workforce of almost 11,000. We accept the argument that the department increases diversity by 1% every year. It will be a half a century before the problem has been corrected. It has already been more than 2 decades. It was 2002 when the Vulcan Society filed its landmark EEOC complaint against the department, alleging discriminatory hiring practices. That matter is still pending today. Less than a year ago, the then Commissioner Nigro was ordered to appear before the court because of the department's continued discriminatory employment practices. In 2019, the unions representing all FDNY EMS first responders filed an EEOC complaint alleging discriminatory pay practices. More than 10 years ago, the court ordered a federal monitor assigned to the FDNY because the department was intentionally discriminating in its hiring practices. That monitor is still overseeing the department today. The department claims it's moving in the right direction, but if we look closer, we see the opposite. The increase in diversity that the department has touted today on the fire side is smaller than the overall increase in diversity in the city's workforce. In other words, they are not even maintaining the status quo. The department wants us to scratch our heads and resign ourselves to the idea that it's just difficult to diversify. It should not be this difficult. This is not a problem of recruitment, it's a problem of intention. As the federal court found, the department is intentionally discriminating in its hiring practices. Thanks to the work done by the court, the federal monitor, and others, women and people of color coming into the department. While the department offers these new statistics to claim that the problem is going away, it's not, because a new problem has emerged, a segregated workforce of first responders in the FDNY. These recruits are not given the opportunity to work as firefighters, but instead are funneled to the EMS side, where they're severely underpaid, undervalued, and allowing the department to continue its practice of exclusion. The only way to remedy this is to remove the disparate treatment between what is now two classes of first responders, making it equally prestigious and financially beneficial to work as an FDNY first responder, regardless of which bureau will remove the motivation that causes the disparity in demographics. Remove the ability to relegate women and people of color to a lesser paid position, and you remove the impetus for exclusionary practices. To reiterate, we've had people come up here and talk about the promotional, and I quote unquote, promotional exam, and that would increase the ranks. The reason why the EMS ranks are used to increase diversity is because the systemic, what we feel is racism towards EMS. You keep the women, the minorities, and the people of color at a lower pay and underappreciated. And when we put this dangle of promotion in front of you, it will make them want to increase our workforce on the fire side. That is an unsustainable way to promote diversity on one side, by beating down one side of the service, which is what I represent, the EMS side. So I thank you for your time and commitment to the important work. There is a lot to be said about the disparate treatment between a firefighter and between an EMT and a paramedic and a fire inspector. I mean, I heard a lot of testimony about bathroom keys and women being able to get in their own bathroom. My females on this job have to beg a 7-Eleven employee to use their bathroom. We have to beg people on corners to use their bathrooms. So if we're talking about trying to fix what might be a dirty bathroom in a firehouse, understand that 30% of the females in FDNY are using bathrooms on corners and with no protection of whether or not there's even a camera in these bathrooms. Thank you for your time. I'm available for any questions you have.
Great, thank you, Michael. We'll turn to Arlene Simmons, Daryl Chambers. Arlene.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arlene Simmons. I've been an EMS first responder for the City of New York since 1993. I currently serve as a deputy chief in the EMS Bureau of the New York City Fire Department. From July of 2016 to August of 2018, I was assigned to the Office of Recruitment and Retention for the Fire Department. The Office of Recruitment and Retention is an integrated unit that recruits both EMS first responders and firefighters together. Our recruitment efforts included tabling and other outreach efforts that targeted women and communities of color. We were instructed to staff these tables with fire department, FDNY representatives who were women and people of color to portray a sense of diversity in the department. Our primary duty in these recruitment efforts was to get as many people, specifically women and people of color, to fill out the expressions of interest, or EOIs. EOIs are forms people fill out to express an interest in applying to the department, either for the EMS side or the fire side, after which the department is supposed to follow up to help these individuals apply for the position they are interested in. Most of the people who come to our tables were interested in the firefighter position, in large part because of the substantial difference in pay and benefits between EMS, first responders, and firefighters. We were specifically instructed to have the people we targeted for recruitment fill out EOIs for both EMS and fire. In other words, we were told to encourage the mostly women and people of color who engaged with us and expressed an interest in becoming a firefighter to also fill out an EOI expressing an interest in EMS, even when they did not have that interest. We were told to advise them that this helped provide more opportunities to become a firefighter and that they should keep their options open. After both EOIs are filled out, non-white and female applicants were then encouraged to apply for EMS because they were told that there is not a long waiting list on the test like fire, that it is easier to get in, and that they could start on the EMS side, which was easier to get into, then transfer to the fire side later, which then really happens. I also want to briefly respond to is the administration's statements regarding the outreach they do in high schools as a recruitment tool for firefighters. In fact, these high school recruitment efforts also do not result in diversification in a meaningful way. As an initial matter, firefighters have an age requirement of 21, so most high school graduates will not meet that requirement to even apply for after firefighter for many years after graduation. Like the other recruitment, these diverse high school graduates are more regularly encouraged to enter the FDNY as EMS with promises that they can be firefighter at a later time. As a result, the process that was supposed to track and support recruitment to diversify the FDNY by bringing in more diversity to the almost exclusively white and male side of the department has the actual effect of funneling women and people of color into the EMS side so that the department continues to be segregated, with almost exclusively white men being let into fireside and almost all women and non-white applicants who matriculate into the FDNY being hired and kept on the EMS side. In the decades that I've worked as an EMS first responder in the FDNY, the exclusionary and discriminatory culture that permeates the FDNY has not gotten better. It persists and in fact finds way to circumvent efforts like the recruitment initiative I just described to maintain the status quo. There is a predominantly white and male side of the department that is respected, valued, and resourced, and another side that is predominantly women and people of color that is undervalued, underpaid, and subject to unfair working conditions. These first responders show up to the same emergencies and have the same risks on the job, but we are treated completely different by our employer. It is, in my opinion, based on decades of I'm sorry, let me just find my page. It is, in my opinion, based on decades of first-hand experience working directly in the FDNY's Office of Recruitment and Retention, that as long as the department is allowed to continue a policy where it values the fire side but does not value EMS side, there will continue to be serious problems with diversity and equal employment opportunity in the department. Lastly, it is my opinion that this change will not come from within the department despite the efforts they represent. They are taking as illustrated with their recruitment efforts. Thank you for your time and thank you for allowing me my testimony.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Daryl Chalmers on Zoom, followed by Lewis Holmes, Anita Daniels, and then William West in person. So Daryl, you may go on Zoom, and then we'll have those other people come up here and testify in person. So Daryl, you may begin once you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Daryl Chalmers. I'm on the executive board of Local 2507 for the fire protection inspectors and with the EMTs and paramedics, but I'm mainly for the fire protection side of the fire department. I agree with this bill that of the testimony that the city council wants to adhere right now. But I also want to talk about certain issues when it comes to fire prevention, but I also want to touch on the subject of EMS, on the issue that if you look at the rest of the United States in this country, it's EMT, firefighter, and fire inspector are all one in most departments. I've worked with a lot of fire and prevention inspectors. We work a lot with firefighters, and a lot of firefighters that I do work with used to be EMTs, and the only reason why they went over to the fire side is because of the salary. And I have fire protection inspectors who are now mostly lieutenants or captains on the job who were with me for like 5 years, and they had to take the open competitive test to become firefighters, because when I asked the past commissioner to ask for promotion to firefighter, he said we weren't allowed. And remember, fire prevention is 85% minority on this job. We're 85% minority. Firefighters and fire inspectors are the only peace officers on this job. We're the only two groups in the fire department that do firematics and understand firematics. And we assist and help the firefighters and lieutenants and captains all the time. And we work very well with them. But a lot of discriminatory practices that the fire department has done in the past has been very bad for us, mainly for people of color. Like I told you, we're 85%. At one time, they wanted to give us yellow shirts because they said they didn't want us to look like firefighters. We're predominantly minority, and remember, we're the peace officers. At the same time, when it comes to fireworks, if I tried to talk to the press office to do any type of statements on how well we're doing with the fireworks, with Macy's Fireworks, if you see that, we're the only ones on the barges who are handling that. When it comes to keeping fires down, the previous administration would always mention that fires are down because of firefighters, EMS, and fire alarm dispatch and fire dispatchers. And we're the reason why fires are down. I'm not knocking the work they do. They do an outstanding job. But every time we walk into a building to make sure it's safe for firefighting operations, for firefighters to fight fires, and for the public to be safe, including the building that you're in right now, we don't never get the credit for that, and I'm definitely going to say that's because we're 85% minority. When I met with Mayor de Blasio, and it was me and as a Vulcan member, Mayor de Blasio, and also I can also say that Commissioner Kavanaugh was there, and after the meeting, de Blasio said, I will make sure you get white shirts and Class A uniforms. And Kavanaugh at the time, she was working for de Blasio, even said to me, this will happen. I've had problems in fire prevention where Chief Hodgins and the acting commissioner has made moves to make things better for me here in fire prevention. And I have to give them credit for that. In fact, one time when she was made first deputy commissioner, she made a statement about firefighters and protecting our fire inspectors and our EMTs, and we almost passed out and fainted because that's the first time anybody has mentioned that. The chief of the department, Chief Hodgins, has said the same thing. We've had CO meters taken from us, and then now the new administration has worked on getting that back for us. Since I've been on this job, I always wore a bunker coat that said fire prevention on it, that's refurbished for our safety when we're doing fireworks. And the old administration took it away, and now with the new administration that's in, they're bringing it back for us. I must say, even the new chief of fire prevention has been doing a good job in communication with us. And I just want to say that there's a lot, trust me, we can go on for hours with this subject. There's a lot of discrimination. There has been some change, but we have to do better. That's all I can say. And thank you for my testimony.
Thank you so much, Daryl. Next, we'll hear from folks on the table, so you all could go in whatever order. Just introduce yourself and then.
Test. Hi, good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I'm firefighter Lewis Holmes. I work at 10 House, which is right down the street near World Trade Center. I sent some photos to Ms. Pincerello that I would like you to review. There's a bulletin in those photos that basically it was revised, but unfortunately FDNY still follow these rituals and practices. Also, I just wanted to address that there's a climate within the FDNY where members are becoming radicalized within a firehouse. And that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be nipped in the bud, because it's a matter of safety. And when I say radicalized, meaning like all during the Trump election and still now, people are very enraged. These members are very enraged that we have a black mayor in the city. There's a lot of white privilege activity that's concealed, and I confront it. And so I walk into an environment where I'm unwelcome because I'm straightforward and I tell them how it is, and they don't like it. There's a member who, in my station, was saying that George Floyd is a piece of shit, and he was talking about justifying the Trayvon Martin shooting and saying that the NYPD should start shooting all black people. And I addressed this. I filed the EEO complaint. He still worked there, and no action's been taken. And I'm still in the same house with him, so I just don't say nothing to him. But I'm still in the same house as him because he has more time than me. And these are just things that need to be addressed. I've addressed it to EEO. I notified BITS. I even contacted the city's Department of Investigation. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you very much for your time, though.
Thank you for your testimony. So is it that you haven't heard back from EEO yet, or it's just?
I retained an attorney, and at that time, I believe EEO said that the matter was being taken care of by the state. But even still, it's still a matter of security and safety that should be addressed. I brought it to their attention. Even BITS should still look into it, and they don't. And the reason why is because I believe there's a conflict of interest where there are members in BITS that have ties to either members to the UFA or have ties to actual firefighters in the station, and it gets swept under the rug. Or when you file these complaints and you bring it to their attention, you say, listen, I want this to be confidential, only because you know the backlash you're going to get is not confidential. At some point, the information is going to, be disseminated throughout the department, and then you'll be labeled as a rat. There's a photo that I sent you where I filed the EO complaint, and they put a rat on my picture in the firehouse, and the captain at the time had to remove it, and nothing was done about it. The captain retired, so he can leave the department and move on with his life, even though that was his responsibility to protect every member, and he didn't do that. Same thing with the former commissioner. He's retired. He gets to enjoy his pension, yet all this took place under his watch with no penalties. Yet the city will be sued and the city has to pay. But what about these leaders who were put in place, like the commissioner and these captains and these lieutenants that don't do anything?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would, Mr. Holmes, I'd say if there's anything you've sent to the council, you said that you sent something to the council, so please.
Phil says she can't forward it. She's
Okay.
trying to
If you could just send it to testimony@council.nyc.gov, just so we could have that as well.
Okay, what was that again?
Just testimony@council.nyc.gov.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you all for listening. Good afternoon now. Trying to put an 8-year battle into a 2-minute speech is a little difficult, but I'm sure I could do it because I've dealt with harder obstacles managing the policies and regulations as well as the members within the FDNY. I kind of want to give you guys my personal testimony, and I want to invite you to 3 pivotal moments in my career that showed me the true colors of this department. The first being my second day within the firehouse. I actually came in with a male individual. I was cooking inside of the kitchen with other members, and I felt a warm sensation that turned into a burning sensation on my leg. I had no idea what it was, so I looked back, and there was a piece of paper on fire on my shoe. The guys were laughing about it. I guess they expected me to jump and be scared and maybe run. I just put it out. I addressed it with the senior member because that's what you're told to do as a new firefighter. Go to your senior man. Don't go to EEO. Don't let them know. Let everything stay within the firehouse. Let it all be handled within the firehouse. That is what I did. Nothing was done. He told me, oh, he's a good guy. Don't worry about it. It won't happen again. And from that moment on, the microaggressions just kept getting worse. it led to filling my gear with unknown wet substances, having my gear hanging from the ceiling even though the hazing policy was in effect at that time, pulling people away from me as I spoke with them, tampering with my food, making comments such as "there's no way you can do this," telling new members not to learn or work with me, basically putting me in exile. This led to me spending a lot of time in my bathroom, getting to know it very well. I'm all of 5'3", and when I turn around in my bathroom, it's a tight squeeze. Not only is the bathroom extremely tight, but I also at that time feared for my safety. I didn't know who to turn to because, again, as a new firefighter, you're told not to go to EEO. You're told to keep it in the house, to go to the senior man, don't let the officers find out, and things of that nature. So instead of actually speaking up, I found myself in the back room when we're supposed to be, taking it easy if we're not on call, with my knife open, sitting, just waiting for someone to come because I feared for my life at this point, but had no one to turn to, no one that I could talk to. This led to my first EEO complaint when I had suffered the loss of my unborn child. I unexpectedly visited the firehouse only to be met with feces smeared on the toilet seat and inside of the toilet. I took a picture and addressed it with the senior members, and then I took it upon myself to show it to the officers on duty because this was too much. Everyone has their limit. And again, nothing was done. It was found unsubstantiated within the EEO office. We have a women's meeting with the borough commanders. At that time, it was Chief Wayne Cartwright. And after talking with him and kind of telling him, look, I'm going through all of this stuff. What is it that you can do for me? Who can I turn to? He tells me that he heard through the grapevine that I was going through all this stuff, but because I didn't follow the proper chain of command and because I went to EEO, that he was unable to help me, that he was unable to do anything to make me feel any more comfortable in my firehouse or reprimand the members who had consistently been causing these rifts and problems within the firehouse. After submitting numerous complaints to EEO, the majority of it all being found unsubstantiated, I guess EEO, or no, I'm sorry, not EEO, but the borough command, I'm saying that wrong. It wasn't Chief Cartwright, it was Chief Richardson at the time, had a meeting with all of the bosses in my firehouse where they decided that the best they could do was to make the members follow the already regulated FDNY work schedule, which is 2 day tours on, 2 night tours on. They weren't allowed to do 24s, and it only lasted for a month. That was the hardest punishment that anyone could get for all of those things that I had just mentioned, which leads to my third thing. July 7th, 2022, a few months ago, a captain actually found himself touching my behind. There is a video of it. Commissioner Kavanaugh has actually showed this video to members who were not me, to a few other captains on this job before I even saw the video, while this video is being investigated by the district attorney. And this member, the only thing that happened to this member, he wasn't allowed to work in the position to do overtime that he was at. He's still allowed to do overtime in his firehouse. He's still allowed to work with women. This sexual predator is still in the FDNY working with no reprimandments while I, sorry.
Take your time.
Yeah, okay. While I had to miss out on huge amounts of pay due to the inability for my mental health of working, while I had to lock myself in the bathroom, turn the water on to muffle my cries so that my children wouldn't hear me. Being so violated and constantly traumatized by this fire department has just led me to ask for you guys to challenge the inefficiency of the EEO department and to have it moved to an outside agency unaffiliated with the FDNY, because as we all know, doing the same thing over and over again.
and expecting different results is the literal definition of insanity. And two, to restructure firehouses to be more inclusive and expectant of women. And again, I'm all of 5'2", turning around in my bathroom is a problem. They're not expecting so many women on this job, and that needs to be addressed. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Hello? Okay. Well, I'm glad you went first. That encapsulates a lot of what I needed to say here. My name is William West. I'm a New York City firefighter. I was also the outreach coordinator for the African Americans within the fire department through that tremendous campaign that we did have. So I did work under the constituency that was here prior. Just like many of the people here, I have a perfectly clean FDNY record and civic record. I'm here because I wanted to let everybody know that the EEO department and BITS have failed. In regards to, right before I say that, in regards to this lawsuit that everybody talks about that the Vulcan Society has won, that was administratively and for recruitment department. The same racist tones are still present within the fire department today. So the only wins that were accrued by that was the fact that there were things that were shown that were tangible that now changed how we recruit and now changed how we try to retain. That's it. But the tone is still maintained, and that's where BITS and EEO is supposed to come into play as a safe space or a place where we are able to get some sort of a help in regards to things that are consistently going on. There was no come to Jesus moment for the fire department. It was only a court-regulated mandate that they had to now keep in place. That's it. So in regards to BITS and EEO, my testimony, it's very short. It's tremendously large font, so it's only 4 pages, but it's really big font, so it'll be over soon. EEO has an alarming ratio of finding cases of black firefighters versus officers unsubstantiated. Black firefighters have often provided tangible evidence which spans from character assassination to forgery. Historical patterns of racism corroborated with testimonies for proof and cited procedures and regulations that are violated. With all of the above submitted, black firefighters routinely have their cases unsubstantiated by far weaker and lesser submissions on the behalf of the officer. Thank you. When EEO is asked what is the burden of proof that is substantiated for a firefighter's case to be substantiated, it's apparent that there seems to be no viable system in place, which is why the Vulcan Society responded to the with an assessment of no confidence in the EEO department. EEO presently operates in such a murky fashion that black firefighters know this process will not be much of an assistance. In fact, it's a hurdle and an obstacle. EEO and BITS is just a checkbox that must be checked for the claimant to then be able to enlist outside help. Yet, that EEO checkbox will almost absolutely prove damaging to the black claimant. The unsubstantiated EEO claim that is eminent then handicaps the efforts of the black firefighters' outside effort, since it is unsubstantiated, and that's the foundation established by the EEO and BITS organization. The black firefighters are at a loss. So already, with no answers available from EEO, along with BITS, and they provide the claimant, EEO along with BITS provide virtually no way for the claimant to obtain the information pertaining to their cases. A FOIL request can be made but is routinely denied, thus leaving the claimant with no way to continue with outside assistance, and when with the unsubstantiated claim, it tarnishes their career and leaves them open for retaliation, which occurs in many different ways. In closing, the EEO and BITS departments have routinely circumvented any racial biased language in their summarizations towards white officers. The EEO office departments have forced mediation to absolve the officers of penalty, the same practice is not given to the firefighter in their situations. Proven to be, the EEO office and BITS is proven to be toothless towards officers when executing penalties. And lastly, shown to be detrimental to black firefighters making claims. It's my recommendation and hope that the EEO and BITS department structure somehow mirror the NYPD, as the NYPD has a community review board that will hopefully not be influenced like the EEO board is. Last 2 points is Don Wynn. He earlier in this meeting has said that he works very closely with operations. The problem is that operations is the fire side. So he, the civilian side of the fire department, works with operations. I make a claim, a firefighter makes a claim towards the officer, that is operations. This is why there's such a cahoots, if you will. It looks like everything is murky on that side because nothing ever comes down direct, because he has to talk to operations, which then trickles down the information to the officers, and that's how information gets disseminated that's supposed to be confined within that realm of me and the EEO officer. And also, there was never a hard penalty given to the operations side since they handle it. The substantiated cases that he talked about earlier today, they also incorporate EMS. He was not definitive in talking about the fire department side of substantiated cases, which is almost none. And lastly, his directives are not always followed in the field. That's why I would say that EEO and BITS is toothless, because there were directives that were given for firefighters to return back to their firehouses, which operations did not honor. I don't want to go into any personal cases, but that's my testimony, and if you have any questions, I'm definitely open to answer them.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Next, we'll hear from Taisha Pugh, followed by Alonzo Baker and Corey Boykin. You all are welcome to go. And Taisha, I called you first, so go ahead.
All right, I should be real quick. I guess I would like to talk about the bathroom facilities. I agree that they should be updated. I guess my personal experience is like, I know my bathroom is really only set up for one person. If we want to be inclusive, we want more women around, they should be set up for more women to come in. Also, even more comfortable for the guys, because the guys change in the hallway. And other firehouses are like that. Mine's not the only one. So they try not to, be naked and whatnot, but it would definitely be more comfortable if we all had our changing facilities. I also know in my battalion, there's 2 firehouses where the women's restroom is in the bunk room. So one of the girls, when she comes in the morning, she'll change in the bathroom downstairs because the lights are off, everybody's sleeping. So yeah, some people have to deal with that. And I've also been to details where, I went to a detail where the bathroom was, somebody they said, oh, I have to clean up the bathroom, and the toilet was clean, but then the shower had boxes in it. So I'm like, if we do get a fire, I won't be able to take a shower. But that's that. The second thing I'll just speak on, the no confidence in EEO. Like, I was in a house where, so just to let you know, like the firehouse, the senior person in the firehouse, they kind of, they take, as a junior person, me as a junior female coming into the firehouse, you know, it's a scary situation. So you're seeing people take care of you. Like Anita was saying, a lot of times you could go to the senior person when you have problems. And I had a great senior person where I could go to with problems and they would take care of them. I have great senior people in that house, and so they had a situation where we had problems with the supervisor, so he had a complaint put on him by a supervisor, and it went through EEO. EEO did their process, and it came out in his favor, but they actually sent him out of the house. Even though it was in his favor, he stayed out of the house for several months, and the boss stayed in the house. And that whole thing changed the whole temperature of the house, because now people feel like, you know, it seems like, you know, nothing happened. No punishment was given to the officer who had the complaint. That was it was not in his favor. It came out that his complaint was in the wrong, and nothing really happened to him. But so that's my thing about no confidence in EEO.
I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier. I didn't know this hearing was going on. But I heard someone say that you would have to go to the bathroom at 7-Eleven, the ladies. Have you ever experienced that?
No, I haven't had to go to the bathroom at 7-Eleven.
I would love to find out what situation that a New York City firefighter would have to go to a bathroom at Dunkin' Donuts or anywhere else other than, I don't know where the men go if they out on I would love to start hearing that. And just with this hearing, is mind-blowing that in this day and age, women and men are going through this, and it's almost like we should have something in place with a whistleblower instead of EEO, because so far it's looked like nothing is happening. If the little time I've been here, witnesses have stated over and over that nothing happened after they go to EEO, that is something wrong. And to be in a house, imagine a husband and wife who had an argument and they really at odds, but they gotta stay there. And that's almost what living in a firehouse is going on. So I am here, I wanna get on this legislation, and I'm looking forward, please use me as a resource. I'm looking forward, because this day and age, change has to come. And I'm Councilwoman Darlene Mealy, Brooklyn, sorry.
Great, thank you so much, Councilmember. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if with regard to that, you wanted to hear, no, all right, cool. All right.
You know, if Jackie wants to clarify, I think she was just referring to the.
Okay, we can do it later? All right.
Please, I would love to have that info.
Okay, yeah, we can for sure connect you.
Firefighter Jackie Michelle Martinez, President of the United Women Firefighters. To answer your question, Councilwoman, that example was given about EMS. EMS is on an ambulance, and they have an 84 position. That's a position where they sit in their general area before they go to their calls. And unfortunately, they're not close to their EMS station. Majority of people are dispatched throughout the city, meaning they have an 84 place where they sit before they get their calls to before they're dispatched to an emergency. So they have a cross-street location, and they sit in that cross-street location. But if they have to use the bathroom, they call the dispatcher to request for facilities use to get a 100. That is an actual code. And then they can go to any bathroom. But unfortunately, it's public bathrooms. They have to, EMS will have to now, if they're close to a firehouse, most of them knock on the doors and request to use the first floor bathroom, which is the gender neutral bathroom in every firehouse, or they try to go to the closest, you know, you never know when you have to go. You have to go to the closest bathroom, and, you know, unfortunately, even in our uniforms, there's businesses that say it's for their employees. So that's some things that they may face. Firefighters, we're blessed enough to have our own facilities. I need to stop saying that. We're not blessed. It's an obligation for the city, for the firehouse, to provide adequate facilities. And unfortunately, the facilities are not adequate for women as well as for men. The men don't have a changing room. Majority of the firehouses, men go to the bathroom and then their lockers are dispatched in an open area. They don't want to change there either. Just like so women, we get these, they take phone booths and slop sinks and they make a closet into a bathroom because they realize that women are not in a great number. So most firehouses, when you look at the female facilities, can't even house 2 lockers. If there's 2 women in a firehouse, the bathroom can't even house their locker. It's usually outside of the facility. So they need an overhaul on the bathrooms to accommodate the influx of women that they projected to get on.
Thank you for clarifying that. Go ahead.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Alonzo Baker. Firefighter. I'm going to try and make this a tad brief, but just like Regina Wilson, Jackie Martinez, and you have Taisha, Anita, who was here a minute ago. You got Will West. Louis Holmes was here. You have so many people that are here testifying the same exact thing, and I don't know. I hope that this does something. We, just like Council Member Darlene just heard just now, and now she's on board with it, just hearing it after a few seconds. If you have somebody that you go home to, wherever your children are, your grandchildren are, and they are having problems at work, then they still have to go back to that same job where they're being abused at, you probably do something immediately. But we can't do anything because we have to still put food on our tables. We still have to go back to the place where we're being mistreated and abused every single day to go fight for every other person in the city. But it's extremely disconcerting. How do I put this? EEO and BITS are a retaliatory, nepotistic entities. That's what they are. And it needs to be restructured to better serve its members. EEO is a retaliatory, nepotistic entity, EEO and BITS, that needs to be restructured to better serve its members. They both work in collaboration with each other, and they both make sure that the department stays looking good to the public, which is why anytime you have, that's the reason why all of them were here earlier. Like, EEO doesn't need to be here, but they're here because there's a problem of some sort big enough as to where all of you have to listen to it. So obviously something is wrong. Then when you hear all of our testimony, now you hear what's going on. This is just from the brave people that were here, the people that were brave enough to come forward today. Now, I still have to go back to work. They do too. They still have to go ahead and face these same people who mistreat them in the firehouse. We all do. We have to. Otherwise, we can't put food on our tables. But you all get to go home and go do whatever it is you usually do. We still have to deal with this stuff every day, and it's not fair. The intimidation of EEO. I particularly had a case where I told the EEO some of the racial injustices that were happening. The witnesses that I told them to talk to, Don Wynn specifically made it a point to have other firefighters at these meetings, other union members at these meetings that he didn't tell them that they were going to be there. So imagine you go ahead and you have a problem, let's say Councilmember Carr has a problem with Darlene, and you go ahead and tell someone else, but all of Darlene's friends are going to be there, all of them. So what are you going to do? You're either going to be quiet, go back to work, or you're going to have to deal with that again. And that's what happens. He made sure that all of these people are here at these meetings to intimidate all of your witnesses. So that way when they go up and speak on your behalf, they shut up. Oh, such and such said something about biggest representation, but he didn't give the house up. They didn't give the house up to make sure that the house looks good. Because if they say anything in your behavior, on your behalf, then it makes them look bad. And believe me, they don't want that heat any more than you do. So you're just one member out of 50 or so in a firehouse, and you don't want to have to deal with that problem. That's just some guy you work with. BITS itself, BITS is supposed to be the other part of the department which deals with the criminal aspect of things. BITS has made it a point to bring people up on charges without even speaking to them. I'll say it again. BITS has brought people up on charges without even talking to them. I am pretty sure that's illegal. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it is. But this is what is happening. This is my testimony. This is what is happening. I don't know if it was you, Councilwoman Joanne, or was it, I think her name was Councilwoman Williams, who asked Dawn a question. And she said, how long does it take to interview people? It took, I do have to remember, and then he lied. He lied right to your face and said, it took a certain amount of time in a few weeks or days. He's a liar because it literally took him 6 months to talk to two people. This is just for me. I could literally walk around the world in 80 days and talk to every member of everybody's family in 2 weeks, but it took his apartment 6 months to do this? So, what's his name? Judge Garafagas yelled at him, just went off because he kept lying to him. And just like you all had inside information that he didn't know that he was lying, that, of course, you're correcting it from his face, you're like, you know what, that's not true. The judge said the same thing. That's not true. What is this organization doing? They told you I know I'm supposed to kind of stick to my particular experiences, but Don went and they just said so many lies. It just literally irked the hell out of me, and I couldn't believe that this is what's going on. So I'm gonna try. All right. Imagine I never smoked, I never drank, I never did drugs, but I now have to. I'm trying to say this. I now have to have counseling because of what has happened on this job. I now have to take measures to make sure that I am okay just to work in this field. I shouldn't have to. We all run into burning buildings while other people are running out to save them. We can't possibly do that when I'm taking a hose and I'm doing this and I'm fighting the fires and there's no backup man behind me because my backup man doesn't like me because I told about some racial things that happened in the house. So I'm in the fire by myself because the rest of my crew that's with me is like, you know what? You told about what happened in the house. You should have kept your mouth shut. So now we're doing this by ourselves. Now you just heard this from a few women and me. And I'm telling you, there are hundreds of more who go through this that don't want to say anything because they're afraid of the backlash that absolutely will happen. And it happens. Don Wynn said that, what did Councilwoman Williams ask him? Something to the effect of, what do you do? Where do you put these people? How do you help them when they come to you? He puts them in the same exact battalion where you're working with the other firehouses that you see every day. So they know who you are. This happened to me. So I'm going to another firehouse, and when I get there, there are CD30s, there are things on your locker that the guys put there that let you know, you're here, get out. We don't want you here. They didn't put nooses on your locker, but it's something to that effect where it's like, because you all don't know what I'm talking, these little things, get out. And this is what is happening to members here on this job. Mind you, this is just a few people that are here. If I wish there were a system in place where you do have a, protection for whistleblowing and whatnot. I know that no one wants to hear me talk because I'm just going to keep running my mouth about every single thing that's happened because it comes a point where you can't take it anymore. Then fine. When I go back to work, when I leave here and go back to work, yeah, I'm going to get a whole lot of flack for it. But what are you going to do? Like, you're just killing me already. So ain't too much else you could do to me. So I'm just going to keep talking until something happens. and hopefully something happens. Again, EEO and BITS are retaliatory, nepotistic entities that need to be restructured to better serve its members. EEO and BITS are retaliatory, nepotistic entities that need to be restructured to better serve its members. One more thing with regard to that. No matter who you complain to, they are the relatives and neighbors, not just friends. I said neighbors, because they all live in Long Island or somewhere on the outskirts of Queens, so that because they want to be in firehouses over there because all of their homes are closer to Long Island. They're all relatives and friends. It's like the other council member said earlier. They're all affluent white males who want to keep it white male job. Like, they don't want any women to be on a job. They definitely don't want any black women to be on a job. They want to keep it that way, the same way it's been for millions of years, or 150 years. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Yeah, thank you both. Appreciate it. Do we have Corey Boykins in the audience here? Okay. Okay, thank you so much for letting me know. Next, we'll turn to Sophie Medina, who I believe is on our Zoom. Sophie, are you available? There you are. You may go ahead once you get unmuted.
Okay.
Thank you, Sophie. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Sophie Medina. I just want to touch on some of the testimonies that I heard today from my brothers and sisters in fire. It's 100%, a boys club in the fire department, to which I have to say I haven't had some of the issues that they have, but I will never negate somebody else's complaints. And I've heard some of these testimonies personally from some of my sisters on the job, and they've also heard my complaints. As far as the misogyny on this job, it's not everybody, and it transcends race. It's not just white males that are misogynistic, it's also men of color that are misogynistic, and that has also been my experience on this job. And that needs to be said, because I think we get lost in identity politics, and bad is bad and good is good, and there's messed up stuff that happens in this job. With that being said, I'll continue with the testimony that I came prepared to mention. I'm a firefighter who's been forced on leave without pay as a result of standing up for myself when it comes to medical freedom, informed consent, and religious liberty. Many women on the FDNY were forced or coerced to take a shot that carries with it the risk of miscarriage and other reproductive unknowns, which are slowly being revealed due to court order. Long-term effects are clearly unknowable at this time, and I pray that the women who were forced to take this avoid any and all of these side effects. As you may all well be aware, there is no state of emergency. Just this week, the President of the United States affirmed what many of us have already known since 2 weeks to flatten the curve. The perspective of the firefighter and EMS worker who were boots on the ground should not have been ignored. And there was good reason why uniformed members of the FDNY had low compliance numbers compared to other agencies until a mandate was forced on them and they were given an ultimatum to either take a shot or lose their livelihoods. Our perspective was different from those who got to stay at home while we were out helping the residents of New York City. What we saw shaped our decisions. What we saw was that what the mainstream news is now trying to catch up to. The people who were dying of this virus who unfortunately are elderly and people who had 4 more comorbidities. The fire department members are particularly young and physically fit, and we made our choices based on facts and not on fear and propaganda. Hence why many firefighters didn't comply at first and submitted religious or medical exemptions. As you know, the city's EEO policy is supposed to prohibit adverse employment actions based on a person's religion. This includes discriminatory practices and decisions, harassment, hostility, and other adverse actions because of a person's creed, religious affiliation, or religious beliefs, observances, or practices. Yet here I am, harassed, excluded, and unpaid because I exercise my rights. I stand with those brothers and sisters that spoke out against EEO and Don Nguyen in particular, as I know that my medical exemption is being sat on right now, and it feels at this point that it is punitive. Here I am with not only my religious exemption being denied, but also my request for a medical exemption that has not been addressed for well over a month, and there are a few others like me. The EO office has violated its own policy by sitting on these exemptions and harassing the members or their doctors after the requests have been submitted. They have also ignored countless emails sent to them. Never before has there been a deadline in place of when one could submit a request for religious or medical exemption. Yet one was arbitrarily placed in order to coerce members to comply with the mandate solely by getting the shot and not by actually allowing for any religious exemptions or medical exemptions being granted. The FDNY states that they want diversion and inclusion, but that doesn't seem to include wanting any dissenting thought, and they've gone out of their way to exclude the unvaccinated members while also violating our rights to medical privacy by implementing policies that highlight an unvaccinated member status as unvaccinated and forcing people to publicly reveal their vaccination status. The deeply religious and spiritual members have also been targeted, and many have been expelled after their exemptions were denied, and they were either terminated or placed on leave without pay indefinitely. On the subject of recruitment, I was a trained recruiter by the FDNY, and I was utilized by the department because of the fact that I fit many demographics. I'm a woman, I'm a Latina person of color, I'm a military veteran, and I'm a mother. My family is bilingual and multicultural. Where is the outrage by this city council, aside from the members who have spoken out for us, when the department pushes me out, or worse, forces me to give up the choices for my own body? When will the full city council get on the right side of history and end these mandates and bring back the members who have had their rights violated and make us whole again? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sophie, for your testimony. Hear, hear.
Thank you, and if anyone else would like to testify, please kind of speak up now. If not, we'll kind of conclude our public testimony, and I will turn it back to Chair Areola to close out the hearing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, the administration, for coming to testify. The absolute bravest who gave public testimony today. My fellow council members who are on this committee and those who are not and made the time to come, like Council Member Mealy, the council members and our speaker who have introduced legislation that is much needed, and we look forward to bringing these pieces of legislation forward. I'd like to thank Judge Josh Kingsley, our committee's counsel, and William Hongash, and the council staff, our Sergeant at Arms. Thank you so much for the time that you put in here with us. I look forward to these bills coming forward. I look forward to further discussion, but I also look forward to resolve. We've heard the testimony. We know what's needed, and now we have to act so that people can feel safe in their work environment. People can get back to work and have their civil rights, religious freedoms, and medical freedoms restored. And Sophie Medina made a very good point. We need an entire council to get behind what's happening so that these injustices can be made just. I thank you for your time. This will end our Committee on Fire and Emergency Management. Thank you, everyone who participated.